Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 333, Stardust Dragon / Assault Mode vs Red Dragon Archfiend / Assault Mode. Since my opponent has a Synchro monster on the field, I can special summon this tuner from my hand, Synchro Clone Resonator. Synchro Clone Resonator, ATK, 100, Level 1. Next, I normal summon Star Gathering Jellyfish to my side of the field. Star Gathering Jellyfish, ATK, 0, Level 1. I activate Star Gathering Jellyfish's special effect. Its level becomes equal to your Synchro monster's level -1. Your Stardust Dragon is level 8, so my Star Gathering Jellyfish becomes level 7. Star Gathering Jellyfish, ATK, 0, Level 7. I tune my level 7 Star Gathering Jellyfish with my level 1 Synchro Clone Resonator. 7 plus 1 is equal to 8. The King's Pulse, now let it surge here. Witness the power that shakes the heavens and the earth. Synchro Summon. My very soul. Red Dragon Archfiend. A gargantuan dragon of deep, burning crimson manifested in the arena. Red Dragon Archfiend, ATK, 3000, Level 8. Masuzu set a single face-down card and, without wasting a second, launched her assault. I use Red Dragon Archfiend to attack your Stardust Dragon. Absolute Power Force. Red Dragon Archfiend's fist, wreathed in roaring flames, smashed toward Stardust Dragon. However, Ryunosuke immediately flipped his face-down card. As the smoke cleared and the dust swept across the track, the 2500 ATK Stardust Dragon remained standing. Instead of shattering, it evolved, entering its assault mode. Masuzu wasn't surprised, she had already tasted how difficult this young man was to take down in the previous round. In assault mode, Stardust Dragon's ATK surged to 3000, matching Red Dragon Archfiend, effectively halting the attack. But a moment later, the Red Dragon Archfiend across from him also entered its assault mode, its ATK skyrocketing to a massive 3500. It turned out Masuzu had also flipped a face down, they had both set the exact same card, assault mode activate. Masuzu offered a thin smile. We're surprisingly in sync, aren't we? Are you sure you won't reconsider joining the tag team tournament with me? Ryunosuke shook his head. Sorry. I still have school here, I can't just leave to enter tournaments. I appreciate the offer, though. Is that so? What a shame. Masuzu spoke with regret, but her hands showed no mercy. She ordered her 3500 ATK Red Dragon Archfiend / Assault Mode to strike again. This time, the flames around the dragon's claws grew even more intense, slamming directly into Stardust Dragon / Assault Mode. Due to its special effect, Stardust Dragon / Assault Mode wasn't destroyed on the field, but Ryunosuke still took 500 points of piercing damage to his life points. Ryunosuke, LP, 4000 to 500 equals 3500. Ryunosuke's red D-wheel sputtered and slowed from the impact. Masuzu gave a dismissive smirk, spun her D-wheel back to the front of the pack, and set 4 face-down cards at once before ending her turn. Ryunosuke's turn, drawl. As another lap passed, their speed counters ticked up by 1, bringing the total to 2. I activate SP Angel Baton. Since my counter is at 2, I can draw 2 cards from my deck. Ryunosuke drew his cards. I discard Quillbolt Hedgehog to the graveyard and summon the tuner monster Debris Dragon in defense position. Debris Dragon, ATK, 1000, Def, 2000, Level 4. From my hand, I normal summon Speed Warrior. Speed Warrior, ATK, 900, Level 2. Then I activate the spell card Double Summon. This allows me one more normal summon this turn. I bring Junk Synchron to the field. Junk Synchron, ATK, 1300, Level 3. I'm not done yet. Ryunosuke shouted over the roar of the engines. While there is a tuner on the field, Quillbolt Hedgehog can be special summoned from the graveyard. The Hedgehog Ryunosuke had just discarded scrambled back onto the field. Quillbolt Hedgehog, ATK, 100, Level 2. Masuzu's brow furrowed. This rhythm, he was about to call out his second ace. Ryunosuke began his synchro summon once more. The yellow-clad Junk Synchron pulled the starter cord on its back, dissolving into rings of light that merged with Speed Warrior and Quillbolt Hedgehog. 3 plus 2 plus 2 is equal to 7. Clustering feelings will awaken a new power. Become the path that shines with light. Synchro Summon. Burn, Nitro Warrior. A hulking green warrior appeared in the arena with 2800 ATK and a level of 7. Nitro Warrior's special effect, if I've activated a spell card this turn, its ATK increases by 1000 during damage calculation. Nitro Warrior, ATK, 3800. Masuzu finally saw the chain of the combo. So, when you activated double summon, you were already planning this. The corners of Masuzu's mouth turned up. This man was far too interesting, she truly wanted to keep him for herself and play cards with him every single day. Ryunosuke felt his preparations were complete and launched the offensive. I order the 3800 ATK Nitro Warrior to attack your Red Dragon Archfiend. Nitro Knuckle. Nitro Warrior clenched its glowing fist, lunging toward Masuzu's dragon, which only had 3500 ATK. Don't count on it. Did you forget my 4 face-downs? Masuzu waved her hand. Activate trap card, interdimensional matter transporter. Ryunosuke's pupils contracted. Wait. Isn't that Seto Kaiba's card? He suddenly remembered that in the previous round, Masuzu had borrowed Kaiba's deck. It was no wonder she had it. Following the card's effect, Red Dragon Archfiend was banished from the field until the end of the turn to avoid destruction. Ryunosuke immediately redirected his attack toward the player, but Masuzu flipped her second face down, a card that forced the opponent to choose between having their attack or stopping it entirely. Naturally, Ryunosuke chose to have the attack and press forward. This blow had to land, even if Masuzu had other cards to block him. With Stardust Dragon/Assault mode's effect, he would be just fine. Ryunosuke commanded Stardust Dragon/Assault mode and the half-strength Nitro Warrior to strike together. With their ATK divided, the total damage dealt was 3,400 points. Masuzu, LP, 4000 to 3400 equals 600. Masuzu's D-wheel slowed drastically from the sudden drain of LP, allowing Ryunosuke to pull up alongside her. He glanced over and gave her a smile. Still have enough in you to keep fighting, Natsukawa-san. Masuzu returned the smile, looking just as captivating as ever. Of course. Who do you think you're talking to? Besides, from now on, just call me Masuzu, and I'll call you Ryunosuke. Chapter 334, The Call of the Divine, the Winged Dragon of RA. Ryunosuke didn't sense anything amiss about the casual exchange of given names. He was currently deep in his Chunibu mode, a state where his brain wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders, leaving him, frankly, a bit of an idiot. If he were thinking clearly, he would have noticed that his first and third wives behind him were currently radiating a scorched earth aura of jealousy. AI and Megumi simultaneously puffed out their cheeks like steamed buns. They were watching the match from a distance, and though the gap was wide, they could hear every word through the D-Wheel's integrated intercom. The conversation between Ryunosuke and Masuzu rang with painful clarity in their ears. Using first names on the very first day. Does this damn man have some kind of over-the-top passive charm spell active? Megumi and AI thought in perfect, resentful unison. Back to the duel. Masuzu was truly backed against a wall. As Ryunosuke's turn concluded, the speed counter ticked up to 3 points. Red Dragon Archfiend/Assault mode had also rematerialized on the field following the effect of interdimensional matter transporter. Masuzu flipped her final face down. Activate Continuous Trap. Tyrant's Bind. I equipped this to Red Dragon Archfiend/Assault mode, boosting its ATK by 700 points. Red Dragon Archfiend, ATK, 4,200. Masuzu swept her hand forward, commanding an attack against Stardust Dragon/Assault mode. Why not target the higher ATK Nitro Warrior? There was a tactical reason. Stardust Dragon/Assault mode was far more of a headache to keep on the board. Seeing his dragon about to be toppled, Ryunosuke decided to bet everything on a mutual destruction. Flip face down. Activate SP Speed Energy. Since my counter is at 2 or more, Stardust Dragon gains ATK equal to the counter value times 200. With the counter currently at 3, that meant a 600-point boost. Its power surged to 4,200, exactly matching Red Dragon Archfiend. Stardust Dragon/Assault mode let out a thunderous roar and lunged, engaging in a visceral, one-on-one clash of wills. The two dragons clawed and tore at each other, spiraling into 2 streaks of red and white light that collided repeatedly, eventually piercing the atmosphere and soaring into the vacuum of space. Stardust sank its teeth into the enemy's throat while Red Dragon Archfiend howled in agony, retaliating with a bone-crushing bite of its own. The 2 drakes plummeted from the heavens and struck the earth with a deafening boom, shattering into 1,000 starlight shards. Both dragons were destroyed. However, per its special effect, the destruction of Stardust Dragon/Assault mode allowed Ryunosuke to special summon the original Stardust Dragon back to the field. Across the track, Masuzu did the same, bringing back her 3,000 ATK Red Dragon Archfiend. The scales seemed balanced once more. AI, watching through binoculars, felt her blood pumping. If her card-playing skills weren't so abysmal, she would have jumped in long ago. Now it was Ryunosuke's turn. When he saw the card he drew, a dismissive smirk played on his lips. He was done playing games. The trick of seeding the deck wasn't just your move, you know. Ryunosuke revealed the card in his hand, one of the three Egyptian gods, the eldest brother, the winged dragon of Ra. Masuzu's pupils dilated in instant shock. Crap. Ryunosuke threw his hand out with majestic flair. I offer Stardust Dragon, Nitro Warrior, and Debris Dragon as tributes. Tribute summon. Soar across the infinite skies. The immortal bird that rises from the ashes. The winged dragon of Ra. Ryunosuke slammed the god card onto the dual disc. The three monsters dissolved into pillars of light that pierced the firmament. The sky bled into a deep, burning crimson as a golden phoenix emerged from the clouds, shrieking with a divine authority that made even Red Dragon Archfiend instinctively bow its head. Ra's ATK is the combined total of the three tribute monsters. Stardust Dragons 2500, Nitro Warriors 2800, and Debris Dragons 1000. The fusion of the three created the god's true power. The winged dragon of Ra, ATK, 6300. Furthermore, a god card is unaffected by traps. Spell effects only last a single turn. This is checkmate. You have no moves left, Masuzu Natsukawa. Masuzu bit her lip. She knew she was beaten, but she refused to surrender, choosing instead to face the final blow. Ryunosuke didn't hold back, ordering Ra to incinerate Red Dragon Archfiend. God Phoenix. Ra let out a piercing cry, transforming into a soaring phoenix of solar fire that tore through Red Dragon Archfiend, vaporizing the dragon and all of Masuzu's remaining face-down cards. Masuzu screamed as her LP plummeted to 0. But strangely, her white D-wheel didn't slow down, instead, it accelerated, tearing ahead down the track. Ryunosuke, savoring the win, began to lower his guard. On the sidelines, AI put her hands on her hips with pride, her face saying, "See. That's my men." AI was impressed, but a realization slowly dawned on her. Masuzu was getting smaller in the distance, showing no signs of stopping. Ryunosuke noticed it too. He tried to give chase on the red D-wheel, only to find the system had been remotely locked, the tires were jammed tight. It was Masuzu's doing, after all, the bike was technically hers. Masuzu stuck her tongue out at Ryunosuke and her cousin, waving a playful goodbye. "See ya, cousin. I'll give the cards back once I'm done with them." AI clenched her fists, her face turning beet red with fury as she shrieked at the top of her lungs. "You witch! Give me back my obelisk." Masuzu had made off with one of AI's god cards, Obelisk the Tormentor, along with Kaiba's support deck and the Red Dragon Archfiend set. AI stomped her feet in a fit of rage. Ryunosuke pushed the dead D-wheel over to her, remarking with a dry chuckle, "Your cousin is certainly unique." He didn't feel particularly guilty, it wasn't that he wouldn't chase her, but a human can't exactly outrun a motorcycle. Feeling utterly robbed, AI threw herself into Ryunosuke's arms, wailing at the sky. "My cards, my precious cards." Her crying was truly heart-wrenching. To a duelist, their cards are their soul, especially when it's the only god card of its kind in the world. Ryunosuke could only pat AI's back resignedly, trying to soothe her. "Yuwa," AI continued to cry, her world momentarily shattered. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access Kamikawa Naoki END. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 335, The Big Four Zaibatsu, Just How Wealthy Are They? Ryunosuke stroked the hair of the girl in his arms, gesturing for her to stop her sobbing. AI began to play the part of the spoiled sweetheart, burrowing deeper into his chest as she sought comfort and warmth. Ryunosuke had little choice but to hold her tight, steadying her frazzled heart. It was exactly at that moment that an unfamiliar voice rang out. My, are you two a couple?" Hearing the intrusion, Ryunosuke and AI reflexively turned their heads. They saw a beautiful girl with short black hair and a lively aura. Her face bore a 70% resemblance to Yukino, and she was watching them without so much as a blink. AI and Ryunosuke spontaneously broke their embrace, their brows furrowing. Realizing she had become a third wheel, Haruno waved her hand with an awkward chuckle. "Haha, sorry for interrupting your little moment." However, Haruno's reaction felt entirely half-hearted, leaving them both with a distinct lack of sincerity. AI narrowed her eyes, eyeing this beautiful older sister with sharp suspicion. "Who are you?" Haruno proceeded to introduce herself. "Hello. My name is Yukino Shida Haruno, Yukino's big sister." Haruno gave a mischievous wink and moved straight toward her primary objective. She stepped right up to Ryunosuke, studying him from a dangerously close distance with intense curiosity. Ryunosuke felt a bit stifled by the sudden pressure. "May I ask, Yukinoshita Haruno-san, what business do you have with me?" Ryunosuke naturally knew who she was, but he had to maintain his cover of ignorance. Haruno then produced a business card from her pocket. "Hello. My family is in the construction business. After you graduate, would you be interested in working for me? I can provide the highest level of facilities. I'd even make you the CEO of one of our public companies immediately." The position of CEO, the top leader responsible for heading the board of directors, representing the company's interests, and serving as the core architect of business strategy. In short, it was the seat of ultimate decision-making power. Haruno's cunning intent was crystal clear. She had come here for the sole purpose of headhunting talent. Just as Ryunosuke was about to speak, a wary AI stepped in to shield him, making the executive decision on his behalf. "I'm sorry, but my men will be working at my company after graduation. So, Yukinoshita-san, you've come all this way for nothing." AI stood with her hands on her hips, her aura shifting drastically into that of a sovereign ruler, a far cry from her usual Kuderi persona. Perhaps this was the true radiance of a daughter to a Fortune 500 tycoon. The only reason she acted ordinary before was because she felt no need to show off, not because she didn't know how to negotiate. Ryunosuke could only offer a bitter smile. AI was certainly bold, making unilateral decisions for him. But no matter, since she was the first wife, he would simply indulge her. He truly did cherish her, after all. Besides, AI was the one tasked with managing the 3 palaces and 6 pavilions of his harem. Without her management, Ryunosuke's personal life would have descended into chaos long ago. On the other side, Megumi watched with a deep, piercing gaze, the dagger behind her back already unsheathed. If it weren't for the fact that her eldest sister, AI, was present, she would have already pressed the blade to Haruno's throat. She sensed this woman was dangerous, a potential predator after her men. Seeing her goal thwarted, Haruno pivoted to Plan B. She suddenly blurred forward, bypassing AI's defensive line to bring her face inches from Ryunosuke's. "Nay, if you agree to Big Sis's offer, I might even consider going on a date with you, you know." Haruno gave a faint, knowing smile. Her shoulder-length black hair, tinged with purple at the tips, radiated a subtle scent of blue roses. Combined with her mysterious smirk, she looked captivating, a mature woman who had mastered the art of seduction. To her, as long as she could hijack this man to her side, a little self-sacrifice was no issue. At most, she'd let him hold her hand or some other triviality, anything else was off the table. Haruno was no fool, this was all just negotiation capital. Faced with Haruno's temptation, Ryunosuke remained unmoved. "I'm sorry. Your terms are enticing, but I suggest you take them back, otherwise, you might die." Haruno frowned. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, she felt a biting chill at her neck. Megumi had pressed a dagger against her skin, her eyes devoid of warmth. "Just as I thought, this woman is here to steal my men." Beads of cold sweat formed on Haruno's forehead. She hadn't even noticed how the girl had appeared or drawn the weapon. Ryunosuke merely shrugged helplessly. Tempting him right in front of his 2 wives. That was a death wish. Megumi pressed the blade a fraction closer. Haruno immediately raised both hands above her head in surrender. Good grief. Is this school really this dangerous? Haruno screamed internally. She immediately apologized, admitting her mistake for teasing Ryunosuke. Only then did Megumi retract the knife, standing back beside AI with a blank, expressionless face. Haruno clutched her chest, breathing a sigh of relief. It was the first time she had felt that close to the Reaper. Still, she looked up and remarked half-jokingly to AI. "Is she your bodyguard?" "Incredible. I didn't even realize she'd moved." AI shook her head. "She isn't my bodyguard, nor my subordinate. She is my sister. We both serve the same husband." Haruno looked between them. "I see." Surprisingly, she didn't find it that strange. A great man being surrounded by great women was a common enough tale. What made the least sense to her was that AI's family background far outstripped Ryunosuke's. Ryunosuke should have been nothing more than a son-in-law living off his wife's wealth. How could such a unique power dynamic exist? Haruno couldn't wrap her head around it. If AI knew what Haruno was thinking, she would have answered resignedly, "You think I want to share? Who doesn't want exclusive love?" But the girls Ryunosuke attracts aren't exactly ordinary. Many had backgrounds even loftier than hers. There was Arisu, the daughter of the chairman who held total power over the school. Then there was Hiyori, the third daughter of the Shina family, who sat at the lower tier of the Big Four Zaibatsu. One should never underestimate the weight of the Big Four. Even the current Prime Minister of Japan only held his seat thanks to the support of the Koenji Zaibatsu, one of the top 3. And that wasn't even mentioning the 2 most terrifying entities at the top, the Shijo family and the Shinomiya Zaibatsu. particularly the heart of Japan itself, the Shinomiya Zaibatsu, their wealth was beyond comprehension. Their total assets exceeded 200 trillion yen, roughly 20 times the wealth of Bill Gates, overseeing thousands of subsidiaries. Their scale was comparable to the treasury of a major nation. Chapter 336, Robbed Blind. One might think the influence of the Big Four Zaibatsu sounds like a hyperbolic tale, but in reality, it isn't at all. Just look at the Trump figure in the superpower nation from Ryunosuke's previous life, or the men who became the world's richest by selling electric cars. Wasn't he the very one who helped that figure ascend the throne? Thus, descriptions of the Big Four are not exaggerations. If anything, they tend to be a bit conservative. Haruno hadn't given up and wanted to continue her attempt to hijack Ryunosuke, but her progress was halted by Yukino, who came running toward them. Yukino looked completely winded, her hands resting on her knees as she wiped the sweat from her brow. Her stamina was notoriously poor, and she looked utterly exhausted. Once her sister had discovered Ryunosuke's location, the elder Yukino Shida had moved far faster than her to get here. Yukino cried out to stop her, "Nei-san. Stop acting so ridiculous." She absolutely loathed this behavior of her sister's. Even though she was the one who had brought Haruno to see Ryunosuke, did the headhunting have to be done so shamelessly? How was she supposed to face her schoolmates later? Well, granted, she didn't actually have many friends to begin with. Haruno mischievously ducked behind Ryunosuke's back, peeking her head out to address Yukino. "Yukino-chan, don't be so mean. Wani-san just feels that Akasaka-kun has immense potential and wants to invite him to be an honored guest of the Yukino Shida family." Haruno blinked her large eyes with an innocent face. Yukino glared at her sister, then turned to Ryunosuke and bowed deeply. "I'm sorry, Akasaka-kun. My sister has been a nuisance." Ryunosuke waved it off. "It's fine. Don't take it to heart, Yukino-chan." "Yukino-chan." Yukino's brow twitched, she seemed a bit uncomfortable with the familiar suffix. Why was everyone calling her that? It was understandable coming from her sister, but on what grounds was Ryunosuke joining in? The two began to engage in a minor bicker. Haruno looked back and forth between them, watching the pair as if they were flirting. She stroked her chin, plotting a devious idea, then clapped her hands and pulled her sister aside to whisper. "Yukino-chan, help big sis with one thing. Pull Akasaka-kun into the Yukino Shida family. I feel your words might be more effective than mine." Yukino knit her beautiful brows. "Why on earth would you think my words would be effective?" She crossed her arms, failing to grasp her sister's implication. Haruno simply smirked playfully and leaned in close. Yukino reflexively tried to pull away, but Haruno whispered right into her ear. "Be honest with Wani-san, what exactly is the relationship between you two?" Yukino frowned again. "What relationship? What kind of relationship could he and I possibly have? Aren't we just fellow students at the same school?" Yukino looked genuinely puzzled, tilting her head cutely, completely failing to understand. Seeing Yukino's reaction, Haruno realized her guess might have been off, but she wasn't ready to surrender yet. "Could you try to persuade him a little more? This is a task from mother. If I fail to recruit him as a family advisor, I could be in big trouble." Haruno began to shake Yukino's arm. As the eldest daughter, she was starting to act shamelessly, coaxing her own younger sister. Yukino tapped her forehead, feeling embarrassed. "There are outsiders here, can you please maintain your image?" Haruno couldn't care less. An image is just an act for others. Who here is going to care about my image? It's not like I'm facing a client. Haruno's logic was so sound it left Yukino speechless. Haruno took the opportunity to pull her into a hug. "You have to learn to be flexible, Yukino. Don't be so rigid, otherwise, no one will want to help you do anything," Haruno said earnestly. In truth, she wanted to tell Yukino not to shoulder every burden alone, but her sister was too stiff and often pushed herself far beyond her limits. Haruno knew Yukino only wanted to prove to their mother that she was just as capable as her big sister. Yukino brushed off her sister's prying hands, gesturing for her to stay back as she felt flustered. Rejected, Haruno pouted. "Yukino-chan is so mean. And here I was giving wise advice. Wait, why are you pushing me?" Yukino impatiently began to shove her sister away. After offering a final apology to Ryunosuke for the disturbance, she prepared to drag her sister out of there. Haruno struggled with all her might. "Wait a second. I came here for important business. Don't push. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Yukino's face grew incredibly dark. Now, her only goal was to remove this embarrassing person from the scene. Haruno made one last stand by pulling a business card from her pocket and flicking it toward Ryunosuke. He caught it with sharp precision. From the distance, Haruno's final shout echoed back. "Akasaka-kun. That's Big Sis's business card. If you ever want to be the CEO of a public company, remember to call me." The Yukinoshita family's door is always open for you. Ryunosuke gave an awkward but polite smile, waving goodbye to Haruno in the distance. I'll consider it. Yukino felt so mortified her face flushed red with anger. She pushed her sister with even greater force until they vanished from sight. Ryunosuke took a breath of relief. It seems the big sister character type is universally quite wild. Truly a wonder. AI's face also began to darken, as she was reminded of her cousin's behavior and the stolen cards. Suddenly, a terrible premonition washed over her. Given her cousin's nature, there was no way she had only stolen 2 deck sets. As if realizing something catastrophic, AI abandoned her boyfriend on the spot and sprinted toward her dormitory. Ryunosuke watched her go, bewildered by her sudden burst of speed. On the other hand, Megumi's eyes began to sparkle. Now, it was just her and Ryunosuke alone. She began to walk sideways like a crab, slowly closing the distance toward him. Without AI's interference, she intended to enjoy Ryunosuke's company to her heart's content. Ryunosuke could only manage a wry smile. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Meanwhile, the moment she reached her room, AI felt as if the world was collapsing as she threw open the door. Her room had been robbed blind. More accurately, her entire collection of rare cards, including Gondora the Dragon of Destruction, often called the Tantrum Dragon for its field-wiping effect, had been hauled away by Masuzu. Why was she so certain it was Masuzu? Because the culprit had left a note. AI picked up the paper with trembling hands. It read, "My dear little cousin, AI-chan, Big Sis is borrowing your cards for a bit to play for 2 days. If you mind, Big Sis can just buy them with cash. There's a check I left on the table for about 1.18 billion yen. I bought them at the highest market price, so don't miss them too much." AI's body shook violently with rage. She grit her teeth and tore the paper into confetti, screaming hysterically at the ceiling. "Damn you, Natsukawa Masuzu. I'm going to kill you." Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Currently making her getaway on the motorcycle, Masuzu suddenly felt a shiver down her spine. However, she glanced at the large box filled with the cards she had swiped from AI's room right after her duel with Ryunosuke ended, and she figured it wasn't a big deal. Even if her little cousin hated her for the rest of her life, after all, to a duelist, cards are everything. "So, cousin, forgive me. This is the last time. Besides, I've taken all your cards now, so there definitely won't be a second time, ha ha ha." Masuzu kicked the throttle, sending her D-wheel roaring even faster into the distance. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access Kamikawa Naoki END. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, journey to planar word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, infinity reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 337, Ryunosuke voluntarily expelled. AI sat slumped on the floor, surrounded by a chaotic mess of scattered cards and merchandise. She no longer cared about the clutter. Her entire treasure trove, every single rare card she owned, had been plundered by that silver-haired demon. Covering her face with both hands, AI sobbed bitterly. Suddenly, a spark of fury ignited in her eyes. If she remembered correctly, Masuzu had mentioned that the National Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament was about to begin. And Masuzu was the reigning champion for 3 years running. If I send Ryunosuke to snatch her title away, wouldn't that be the ultimate humiliation? There might even be a chance to win my cards back. Without a moment's delay, AI summoned Ryunosuke back to her side. Ryunosuke, receiving her urgent message, scrambled to change his clothes. After tucking in the soundly sleeping Megumi, he sprinted toward AI's dormitory. He arrived at the room in record time. Just as AI was about to speak, she noticed a faint red mark on Ryunosuke's neck. Her brow twitched. "Where exactly have you been?" Ryunosuke panicked instantly, his voice stammering. I wasn't doing anything." Ha. He reflexively adjusted his collar to hide the mark. AI didn't press the issue. She knew exactly who had been sneaking a snack. Besides, she had restricted that girl for far too long, letting her have a taste once in a while wasn't the worst thing. She put her hands on her hips and cut straight to the chase. Pointing a finger at Ryunosuke, she commanded. "Go and enter the Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament." "I refuse." Ryunosuke answered without a second thought. AI's eyes immediately welled up with tears. "Why?" Ryunosuke sighed and explained gently. "The tournament is held off campus, right? If I go to compete, it means I have to drop out of school. Do you really think that's feasible?" AI immediately threw herself onto the floor, rolling around like a spoiled child. I don't care. You absolutely have to enter that tournament. You have a way, don't you? I know you do. She lunged into his arms with a pleading tone. Finally, Ryunosuke had no choice but to give in. He pressed a soft kiss to AI's forehead. Leave it to me. I'll join the tournament. AI didn't say a word, but the corners of her mouth curled into a sweet, triumphant curve. Truly, Herman pampered her the most. She then playfully tugged Ryunosuke toward her bedroom, intending to give him a reward for his loyalty. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. A while later, Ryunosuke tucked AI back into bed and stepped out of her dorm. He had accepted AI's mandate to enter the tournament next month. As for the logistics of leaving school, he already had a blueprint. First, he would transfer his 240 million private points to AI for safekeeping. Then, he would formally apply to drop out. Once the tournament was over, he would have AI spend 20 million points to buy him back into the school. It was that simple. Perhaps feeling a bit guilty, AI provided Ryunosuke with extra compensation, in more ways than one. On top of the physical rewards, the tournament's grand prize was a staggering 100 million yen. It was the perfect amount to clear his debts. Furthermore, AI gave him an additional 40 million yen as damages for having to sacrifice his student status for her sake. Though, in truth, since AI herself already belonged to Ryunosuke, they didn't really need to keep such detailed tallies between them. Truthfully, Ryunosuke's odds of winning weren't great. Almost all of AI's high-tier cards had been looted by Masuzu. The only sets left in his possession were Fudo Yusiai's and Mudo Yugi's decks. He would also bring 2 Egyptian god cards and a hero deck. The reason the hero deck wasn't stolen was likely because it was considered too finicky and prone to bricking, getting stuck with unplayable hands. Ryunosuke's chances were slim indeed, but to make his first wife happy, he was willing to take the gamble. Ryunosuke first sought out Koenji Rokusuke. He used one of his favors to request protection so that he wouldn't be kidnapped or harmed while outside the school's walls. Considering the number of people he had offended, including Ayanokuji's father, he had to be vigilant. Koenji looked at him with an unreadable gaze. My sweet boy. You should think this through. You only have 2 chances to use me, do you really want to waste one on something like this? Ryunosuke nodded without hesitation. Koenji spoke with a hint of disappointment. I thought you were the same brand of genius as I am. What a pity, boy. But I shall grant your request. After all, I, Koenji Rokusuke, always keep my word. Koenji flicked his blonde hair narcissistically. Ryunosuke ignored the theatrics. With this, his safety outside was guaranteed. At the very least, ordinary thugs wouldn't dare touch him, nor would Ayanokuji's father. The only ones who might be bold enough were the top 2 of the big 4 Zaibatsu. But that was unlikely. Why would the Shinomiya or Shijo families bother with him? They had no quarrel with him. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Before long, news of Ryunosuke's withdrawal spread like wildfire through the school. In Class 1A, Amasawa Ichika stared at her phone in disbelief. That man, expelled, she murmured softly. Whatever she was thinking, she snapped her book shut, ignored the ongoing lesson, and swung her bag over her shoulder, heading straight for Ryunosuke's dorm. In Class 2D, Shina Hiyori's beautiful brow knit together. She closed her book, cut class, and began walking toward Ryunosuke's dorm as well. Ibuki Mio did the same. She wanted to know what had happened. Just yesterday, she had thanked her junior disciple for finding her such a good job. Why was he leaving school today? Did this have something to do with her? Had Ryunosuke abused his authority to help her and gotten caught? Consumed by guilt, Ibuki intended to find him. Initially, when Hiyori left, Ryuen wasn't surprised since they were a couple. But when Ibuki also stood up, Ryuen was genuinely shocked and immediately blocked her path. And where do you think you're going? Ibuki stopped and glared at Ryuen with annoyance. I'm going to check on my junior disciple. Is that a crime? Ryuen ruffled his hair in frustration. Are you stupid? The one who just chased after him is his girlfriend. If you go now, don't you think that's a bit inappropriate? At Ryuen's reminder, Ibuki finally sat back down grudgingly, crossing her arms with a pout. Ryuen looked at her with a knowing, playful expression. You, don't tell me you actually like him. Ibuki's face turned a violent shade of crimson. Ryuen chuckled. TCH, that reaction, don't tell me it's true. Chapter 338, it's just a withdrawal, why is everyone panicking? In Class 2C, Sakura Eri, Hasebi Haruka, and a freshly satisfied Kato Megumi all stood up in unison. They were joined by Horikita Suzun, who had finally recovered after a night's rest, Kushida Kikyo, who had just formalized her status, and even Wang Meiyu. They were all prepared to storm Ryunosuke's dormitory to demand an explanation. Karuizawa Kei was about to spring up as well, but her wrist was caught by Matsushita Chiaki. What do you think you're doing? Huh? Kei exclaimed, dissatisfied. Asking for an explanation, obviously. Why is he suddenly dropping out? I'm his girlfriend, don't I have a right to know? Chiaki glanced at the 6 girls who had already sprinted out the door. In an effort to prevent a massive multi-car pileup of girlfriends, she said with a tone of resignation. Akasaka just sent me a quick text. Chiaki relayed the fact to Kei. Ryunosuke would be coming back later, and he was only leaving temporarily to care for his critically ill mother. Hearing this, Kei let out a long sigh of relief and slumped back into her seat. What the, so that's it. Thank goodness. Seeing her best friend abandon the chase made Chiaki feel relieved for her sake, but on the other hand, she felt a surge of irritation. Ryunosuke had indeed messaged her, specifically crafting a lie to keep Kei at bay and avoid a collision between his mistresses. After all, Kei still had no idea that Ryunosuke was currently balancing on 14 different boats at once. The more Chiaki thought about it, the more annoyed she became. Her hands, resting on her thighs, clenched into tight fists. Why do I have to help that scoundrel hide his secrets? If he gets caught, what does it have to do with me? However, seeing her best friend so genuinely in love, Chiaki feared Kei would be devastated. She chose to keep her mouth shut. Meanwhile, in the same classroom, the Nakano Quintuplets reacted as well. Ichika and Itsuki, who hadn't exchanged contacts yet and were in the dark, wanted to follow the others, but they were held back by Nino, Miku, and Yatsuba. Ryunosuke had sent the 3 of them messages using the same excuse, forbidding them from coming so he wouldn't be exposed. Over in Class 2B. Ichino's Hanami panicked the moment she heard the news of Ryunosuke's resignation. She stood up immediately to seek clarity, but her path was blocked by her close friend, Himino Yuki. Himino waved her phone, signaling Hanami to calm down. Ryunosuke had just messaged her saying he was leaving temporarily to visit his sick mother. Hanami patted her modest chest, exhaled in relief, and sat back down with her usual cheerful smile. Thank goodness. I thought something terrible had happened to him. Himino gave a soft, bitter huff. I was actually hoping he'd really gotten into trouble. Ryunosuke used the same trick to keep the oblivious Hanami away, preventing her from crossing paths with the other girls. As one of Ryunosuke's partners, Himino felt obligated to help Herman keep his secrets, even if it was becoming mentally exhausting. Himino leaned her head on her desk, stretching her legs out listlessly. That absolute jerk, just you wait for my revenge. When you get back, you're going to have to compensate me big time. She promised herself. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Elsewhere, Ryunosuke finally breathed a sigh of relief after finishing his text to Chiaki, Himino, Yatsuba, Miku, and Nino. Ever since he nearly sank last time, he had been hypervigilant about repeating the same mistake. At least the situation was under control, though he felt a twinge of guilt for using his mother as a human shield for his excuses. Class 2A. There was no overreaction here. As a genius, Sakayanaji Arisu had already received a full explanation from Ryunosuke. However, she still felt a prickle of jealousy. She placed her chess piece down with a sharp clack. Going as far as self-sacrifice for Ai-chan's sake, hee. Arisu could get jealous too, you know. But regardless, Ryunosuke was her man, she still had to help manage the situation. She commanded a worried-looking Kamuro Masumi and an anxious Yamamura Miki not to interfere. At that moment, Ryunosuke was packing his things in his dorm. Once the news broke, the girlfriends who hadn't been stopped by text messages stormed his room like a mad swarm. He looked at his overcrowded room and was forced to explain himself to each one until his throat was dry. The girls were finally relieved, though a sense of envy lingered. Even though Ai was their eldest sister, they still felt a bit suffocated seeing Ryunosuke willing to leave school just to satisfy Ai's spoiled whims. Hayori even turned her head away, pretending not to care about Ryunosuke out of jealousy. The other girls followed suit. Ryunosuke, facing a massive headache, had to coax them one by one. The school gate. It was time for Ryunosuke to depart. Amasawa Ichika, driven by some unknown motivation, showed up to see him off. By the way, the last time I was at this gate was to see Yagami off, Ichika told Ryunosuke. Ryunosuke didn't acknowledge the comment, instead asking, why are you here? We aren't exactly close, are we? Ichika put on a playful act. Akasaka-senpai is so cruel, we're comrades who've been through life and death together. Life and death comrades. Ryunosuke remembered the uninhabited island exam, where he had indeed been cornered by Ichika and Yagami. Ichika had a point. He also remembered the moment she had pleaded for leniency for them. Thanks for that time. Even though you were eventually taken down by Megumi, I still remember you pleading for us. Ryunosuke placed his hand on Ichika's maroon hair and ruffled it gently. Don't worry, I promised Yagami I wouldn't let you leave this school. Ichika brushed his hand away as it started to get too familiar, then tilted her head with a mysterious, sweet smile while hiding her hands behind her back. Akasaka-senpai, as long as you aren't in this school, I won't cause any trouble. So, come back as soon as possible to let me bother you again. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to stop myself from attacking someone else. Facing a threat that was actually a coded message for him to return quickly, Ryunosuke looked deep into Ichika's eyes. Their gazes locked. Ryunosuke took a deep breath and asked, "Do you like me, Ichika?" Ichika answered lightly, "Huh? Do you really think that's possible, Akasaka-senpai?" Ryunosuke muttered, "Right. I'm just overthinking it." Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access Kamikawa Naoki END. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, journey to planar word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, infinity reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 339, Leaving the School Behind. Ryunosuke sat in a bus seat that felt both intimately familiar and strangely foreign. No one had come to see him off, or rather, only one person had, Amasawa Ichika. She stood by the school gates, waving with a wide, enigmatic grin. Through the bus window, Ryunosuke could see her clearly, her vibrant energy contrasting with the somber finality of his departure. Does this girl really not have a shred of feeling for me, he wondered, bewildered. Even now, Ichika remained a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The reason no one else had gathered was simple, Ryunosuke had strictly forbidden it. If the oblivious Kei or the ever-earnest Hanami had shown up only to find a literal crowd of other girls, his elaborate charade would have gone up in flames. He couldn't risk exposing his web of rivals just yet. Gazing at the scenery blurring past the glass, Ryunosuke's thoughts drifted toward his mother, the only family member who had ever truly loved him. Yet, for some reason, her face remained hazy in his mind, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Fortunately, the memory of where she lived remained intact, and for now, that was enough. He leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the hum of the bus lull him into a trek through the past. He remembered the hunger of his childhood, a constant companion brought on by a father who was a quintessential scoundrel, a man enslaved by the bottle and the gambling den. When the cards turned sour, the old man's fists would find Ryunosuke. The young Ryunosuke hadn't been afraid back then, he would simply crouch in the corner, his eyes sharp and harboring a burgeoning thirst for blood. But he never struck back, after all, the man was his father. He would only tuck his head low, yearning for the warm embrace of his mother. It was a warmth he vowed never to forget, the one constant that had survived even his bouts of amnesia. A faint, peaceful smile touched his lips as he drifted into a rare pleasant dream. Before long, the bus reached its terminus. He stepped off, hauling a large black suitcase packed with clothes and 40 million yen in cash, the parting gift from Manabu. Tucked safely in his pocket was also the 40 million yen check from AI, waiting to be cleared. Now that he was in the outside world, his priority was debt liquidation. Between Manabu's cash, AI's check, and his mounting novel royalties, he finally had enough to wipe the slate clean. Ryunosuke dragged his suitcase toward the Fushikawa publishing offices to collect his earnings. Theoretically, the publishing house belonged to Hiyori's father, his potential father-in-law. Given how deep his bond with Hiyori ran, he suspected that even if her parents disapproved, she was the type who would happily elope with him. He preferred collecting his pay in person. Usually, the funds were funneled into an account managed by Hiyori, but since she was confined to the school and already sat on a mountain of pocket money, Ryunosuke's pride recoiled at the idea of asking her for a card. He didn't want to feel like a kept man, even if Hiyori wouldn't mind in the slightest. He had left the school in capable hands. The student council presidency had been passed to Suzun, with Kushida promoted to vice president to keep things running smoothly. He had also funneled 2 million private points to Asuna, specifically to keep an eye on Suzun. Without supervision, Suzun's rigid nature was a powder keg. And while Kushida wasn't exactly the calm type either, Ryunosuke hoped that since they were both his women, they could maintain a fragile peace. Hopefully. Ryunosuke swiped his card to board the ferry, leaving behind the isolated island that housed Advanced Nurturing High School. The bus had taken him to the pier. From here, he had to navigate the path home alone. On the deck of the ship, he breathed in the salt air and listened to the cry of the gulls. Relinquishing the presidency didn't actually feel like losing power. After all, the real levers of the student council were held by his wives. Hiyori controlled the finances. Kushida was the vice president. Suzun was the president. They were all his people. Even in his absence, the throne remained his because, well, they were all his partners. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Meanwhile, back at the school, Asuna was busy counting her new 2 million points. She had zero interest in politics or power, her heart belonged solely to her gaming rig. It was ironic that the things she wanted least came to her the easiest. But she didn't care, with 2 million points, she wouldn't have to worry about in-game top-up costs for an entire year. Asuna hugged her phone to her chest, laughing like a delighted fool. Her classmates exchanged confused glances, wondering what on earth could have her so giddy. In the end, they chose to doubt their own understanding rather than question her. Hashimoto and Katsuragi adjusted their non-existent glasses with expressions of profound realization. "I see," Hashimoto murmured. Asuna-sama's smile must hold a deep, strategic meaning that escapes us mere mortals. Katsuragi simply nodded in solemn, serious agreement. Chapter 340, Machida Sonoko. The ferry docked at the pier, and Ryunosuke stepped off, his large suitcase rattling against the pavement. The moment his feet touched solid ground, his phone buzzed. It was Hiyori. In this world, points can buy anything, and she had willingly spent 10,000 personal points just to place a call to the outside world. Those were points Hiyori had painstakingly saved herself. Even though 10,000 was no small sum for her, and might mean eating modest meals for the rest of the month, she didn't care. Her worry for her men in the world beyond the school walls outweighed any personal comfort. "Ryunosuke-kun, where are you now?" Hiyori's soft voice drifted through the receiver. Ryunosuke walked along the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear while his other hand hauled the heavy case. He answered with a smile, "Just got off the boat. I'm heading straight to Fushikawa Publishing to collect my royalties." Hiyori chuckled warmly. "Go ahead. I've already contacted them, they will welcome you as an honored guest." Ryunosuke stopped in his tracks, sighing in resignation. "Is all that really necessary? I just want to pick up my paycheck." Hiyori's tone turned slightly playful yet firm. "It is necessary. You are my boyfriend, and Fushikawa is my family's property. Besides, sooner or later, it will all be yours anyway." Hiyori let out a shy, stifled squeak as she said it. While she wasn't wrong, Ryunosuke felt a bit complicated. It felt like being a kept man, and while he didn't exactly hate the sentiment, he knew he had to maintain some boundaries to ensure her parents wouldn't look down on him in the future. He asked if her father knew yet. Hiyori explained that her father was still in the dark about their specific relationship. Ryunosuke understood, they were students, after all, and parents rarely gave an immediate green light to such things. After promising that if she missed him, she could borrow points from AI to call, Ryunosuke hung up. Despite his usual stinginess with points, he was always willing to burn them for his partners. To him, his women were worth far more than any currency or throne. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Fushikawa Publishing Offices. A pair of long, elegant legs clad in tantalizing black stockings, kuro-stoking, crossed and uncrossed impatiently. The perfect curve of her legs was enough to draw praise from any passerby. The owner of those beautiful legs, Kasumigakaka Yutaha, was reaching the limit of her patience. Sitting across from her was her editor, Machida Sonoko. Yutaha knit her brows and rested her chin lazily on her hand. "Old lady, aren't you bored? It's Saturday, a precious day of rest. I should be at home getting my beauty sleep. Instead, you dragged me out just to talk about trivialities. What a waste of my time." "Old lady." Sonoko felt a vein throb in her forehead. Her hand, clutching a coffee cup, trembled with suppressed rage. However, the writer in front of her, Kasumi Yutako, was one of her top earners. Her year-end bonus and salary depended on this girl, so she had to swallow her pride. Endure. I must endure. Sonoko chanted internally. If she exploded, Yutaha's temperament was such that she'd likely go on a writing strike, and Sonoko's bonus would vanish into thin air. Sonoko tried to force a friendly face, but Yutaha's next remark nearly sent her over the edge. Yutaha stretched lazily, accentuating her incredible curves. She leaned over the table, tilting her head with a devious smirk. "You've hit your mid-30s, haven't you, old lady? When are you going to find a boyfriend? Careful, if you get much older, no one will want you." Slam. Sonoko pounded the table with both fists. She couldn't take it anymore. "You think I don't want to find a boyfriend? The problem is I'm 36. Who in this world wants an old woman like me?" Sonoko promptly collapsed onto the table, sobbing. Yutaha felt a twinge of guilt, perhaps she'd been a bit too ruthless in teasing her editor this time. At that exact moment, a young man entered the room hauling a large black suitcase. Strangely, the staff nearby treated him with extreme politeness and reverence. Even the top director of the publishing house hurried out to greet him personally. Yutaha frowned. "Who is that guy? Talk about acting like a big shot." Sonoko looked up, wiping her eyes. "Oh, him. I heard he's the boyfriend of our big boss's daughter. His name is Akasaka Ryanosuke, if I recall correctly. Suddenly, Sanoko's eyes widened. She stared at Yutaha with newfound excitement. I remember. He's Money is Evil Sensei. The writer who helped breathe life back into your novel when it was almost dead. Didn't you always want to meet him? This is the perfect chance to thank him in person. Yutaha, who had been disinterested a second ago, underwent an instant transformation. She stood up immediately, intending to walk straight toward Ryanosuke. Sonoko frantically grabbed her arm. What are you doing, Yutaha-chan? Yutaha replied with a piercing, cold tone, let go. Sonoko was near tears. What are you planning to do, milady? If you want to thank him, I'll arrange a meeting later. Don't go over there now in front of the director. But Yutaha didn't care. She had wanted to meet this man for a long time. She wanted to say thank you, and perhaps start a sweet romance of her own. Seeing her pleas fail, Sonoko finally revealed the gravity of the situation. Do you have any idea who he is? If any scandalous rumors start between you and him, and the higher-ups think my author is trying to seduce their daughter's boyfriend, I'll lose my job. Even if you don't mean it that way, high society people would rather eliminate a mistake than leave a threat. Especially since you're beautiful, we'd both be doomed. Yutaha realized she had acted impulsively. She looked at Sonoko and said, fine. Arrange a meeting then. I want to thank him properly. Sonoko finally exhaled in relief. I'll set it up, but don't try anything funny. He is the boyfriend of our boss's daughter. Yutaha ruffled her hair in frustration, muttering impatiently, fine, fine. I get it. Yutaha's little plan to repay her debt with love, or perhaps even by offering herself entirely, seemed to have hit a major roadblock. Her way of saying thank you was certainly unique. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access Kamikawa Naoki END. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 341, Shina Yuna, the mother of Hiyori. Ryanosuke arrived at Fushikawa Publishing, but he hadn't anticipated such a high-voltage reception. The fact that the CEO himself had come out to greet him was already overkill. Ryanosuke let out a resigned sigh. What on earth did Hiyori tell them? Why is everyone looking at me like a mouse staring at a cat? The staff members, meanwhile, were thinking, how could we not panic? Who would dare be disrespectful to the big boss's future son-in-law? To make matters even more intense, word was spreading that the chairman's wife, Hiyori's mother, was currently en route to the office. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Hiyori's mother was named Shina Yuna. At this very moment, she was enthusiastically flooring it in her luxury Porsche 718 Boxster convertible, racing toward the office with the top down. She was absolutely ecstatic. How could she not be? Her precious daughter finally had a boyfriend. As a side note, she was keeping this a complete secret from her husband. She knew he was a chronic daughter-con who was fiercely possessive. If he found out, he'd likely skip the introductions and go straight to a rampage. For now, only Yuna and the inner circle at the company were in the loop. I have to keep this under wraps. That overprotective husband of mine cannot find out yet. Yuna muttered to herself. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Back at the office, Ryanosuke was experiencing 5-star service he hadn't asked for. The CEO was personally pouring his tea, while the vice director was busy manually fanning him, hovering anxiously to ask if the room temperature was to his liking. Ryanosuke felt awkward enough to point out, you guys have central air conditioning. There's really no need for human-powered fans. His heart was far from calm. He was only just beginning to realize the sheer scale of the wealth behind Hiyori's family. As Ryanosuke took a sip of his tea, the door swung open. One of the highest authorities at Fushikawa, Yuna herself, stepped into the room. The staff scattered instantly with practiced precision. Even the most stunning secretary made a hasty exit to avoid any suspicion of eavesdropping. Yuna sauntered over to Ryanosuke, clasping her hands together and beaming at him with a wide, radiant smile. So, you're Hiyori-chan's boyfriend. My name is Shina Yuna, her mother. Come on, try calling me mother-in-law. Ryanosuke stood up immediately and gave a respectful bow to the mature woman before him. Mother-in-law, he addressed her, following her lead. Yuna tilted her head back with a look of immense pride and satisfaction. She then pulled out a novel manuscript she had written herself and asked Ryanosuke to critique it. She was an aspiring author too, but to be blunt, her writing was atrocious. If it weren't for her husband pouring money into marketing her works, her writing career would have flatlined years ago. Yuna suspected as much, but writing was her dream. She wasn't about to give up. Luckily, the young man in front of her was a bona fide genius who had climbed to the top of the charts as a newcomer. She wanted his professional eye to find her flaws. Ryunosuke began to read his mother-in-law's draft. How to put it? The word bad felt like an understatement. If he had to compare it to anything, the narrative structure was as disastrous as King's Game. However, this was his mother-in-law. He couldn't exactly be a hatchetman. Ryunosuke tried to soften the blow. Auntie Yuna. Just a mother-in-law. Yuna interjected, her eyes sparkling. Yuna's face was as beautiful as someone in her 20s, likely due to a flawless skincare routine. Calling her auntie did feel a bit mismatched with her youthful appearance, so Ryunosuke switched back. Mother-in-law. Yuna looked satisfied. She sat down on the sofa next to him and prodded again. So, what do you think of my novel? Ryunosuke was in a bind. If he told her it was garbage, would his relationship with Hiyori be sabotaged? Yuna seemed to sense his hesitation. She assured him it was fine and told him to speak the honest truth. Since he had been given the green light, Ryunosuke finally relented. To be honest, mother-in-law, this novel is quite cliché and, well, a bit boring. The sentence hit Yuna like a bolt of lightning. She froze in place, looking as if her soul had left her body. A literal wisp of white smoke seemed to escape her mouth. She was utterly devastated. Ryunosuke thought, you were the one who told me to be honest. Don't blame me. After a moment, Yuna recovered and forced a smile. Then, is it still salvageable? Facing the plea of his mother-in-law, Ryunosuke hesitated before saying, Mother-in-law, why push yourself? You're already incredibly wealthy. Why fight for a crust of bread in the harsh world of literature? Yuna slammed her hand on the table. What are you saying? This is my dream. How can I just give up? Fine, Ryunosuke surrendered. He began marking every problematic section in the manuscript. Whether it would actually help, he wasn't sure, but he gave it his best effort. Yuna clutched her corrected manuscript and gave him a sweet, thankful smile. The sight made Ryunosuke freeze for a second. The way she smiled was carbon-copied from the first time he met Hiyori in the school library. Yuna tilted her head cutely and waved a hand in front of his face. Ryunosuke snapped out of it, feeling a flush of embarrassment. Sorry, mother-in-law. For a moment there, you looked exactly like Hiyori did when we first met. I got a bit distracted. Yuna covered her mouth and giggled. It's fine. We are mother and daughter, after all. It's only natural we share similarities. Ryunosuke watched her laugh and felt a wave of awe. It was uncanny. Every gesture was identical to Hiyori's. Yuna's face was an 80 to 90% match for her daughter, the same large violet eyes and the same silvery white hair. The only difference was that Yuna wore her hair in a short, wavy bob, perhaps a deliberate choice to avoid being mistaken for her daughter. If people saw them together on the street, they would easily be mistaken for sisters. Yuna stopped her teasing, tucked her manuscript away, and prepared to leave. She told him to wait a moment longer, as she had already sent someone to fetch his royalty payment. Ryunosuke nodded, promising to wait patiently. Chapter 342, First Encounter with Kasumigakaka Yutaha. Not long after, Ryunosuke received his royalties in the form of a check. He tucked it safely into his pocket and prepared to say his goodbyes. However, Sonoko arrived, trailing Yutaha behind her, to intercept him. Hello there, young man, do you have a moment for a quick introduction? Sonoko nudged Yutaha forward, gesturing for her to speak up and get straight to the point. Sonoko herself played the part of the lookout, glancing nervously left and right to ensure no one was watching them. Despite a flicker of reluctance, Yutaha stepped forward, extended her hand, and addressed Ryunosuke. Hello. My name is Kasumigakaka Yutaha. I'm a fan of yours. Ryunosuke shook her hand politely, though his voice carried a hint of confusion. A fan. You know who I am. Yutaha smiled, reflexively crossing her arms, an action that only served to accentuate her bust, and replied with a touch of her signature sarcasm, Of course I do. You're quite famous, money is evil sensei. Ryunosuke's brow twitched. Had he not known that this was simply her natural temperament, he would have assumed her cynical tone was a deliberate attempt to pick a fight. Sonoko slapped her own forehead. Yutaha-chan. Is that any way to start a conversation, she muttered, mortified by her author's behavior. Yutaha invited Ryunosuke to join them for a meal, claiming she wanted to properly thank him for his help in saving her novel from total failure. Ryunosuke certainly remembered the incident. In truth, he had only done it to make Hiyori happy, as she was a huge fan of Love Metronome. He hadn't intended to actually meet Yutaha. After all, his roster of girlfriends was already overflowing, he had no desire to add another to the list. Yutaha, however, had other ideas. She had come with the intent of repaying her debt, and she had even considered the possibility of offering herself up or starting a whirlwind romance. She traced the rim of her glass with a finger and said with a smile. Money is evil, sensei. I don't actually know your real name. Would you mind telling me? In the publishing world, authors rarely revealed their real identities for security reasons. Yutaha's request was technically overstepping, but Ryunosuke didn't plan on staying in the novel industry for long anyway. With so many powerful wives and high-quality soft rice to eat, why would he bother working hard? Ryunosuke stated his name without hesitation. My name is Akasaka Ryunosuke. Just call me Akasaka. Or Ryunosuke. Yutaha seemed immensely satisfied with the answer. She took a sip of her drink. In that case, from now on, I'll call you Ryunosuke-kun, she said teasingly, resting her chin on her hand. Ryunosuke's brow twitched again. He hadn't expected her to get so familiar as to jump straight to his given name. In Japan, using a first name was usually reserved for married couples, childhood friends, or the closest of companions. Ryunosuke raised his glass and took a drink. You should stick to Akasaka. Ryunosuke isn't a name you're permitted to use. That privilege has already been claimed. Yutaha frowned, catching the implication in his tone that the claimant was almost certainly a woman. She knew she was beautiful, yet the men in front of her seemed completely immune to her charms. Reluctantly, she switched to calling him Akasaka. She had no choice, it was their first meeting, and if she stayed too aggressive, she feared she might truly repel him. However, her mischievous leg began to move under the table, brushing against Ryunosuke's own. Ryunosuke scowled. He reached under the table, caught Yutaha's ankle, and said with a tone of clear displeasure, Kasumiga Kaka-san, please mind your manners. Sonoko barely dared to breathe. Yutaha-chan. This was not the plan. You said you just wanted to say thank you, why are you playing footsie? He's the future son-in-law of my boss's boss. If you keep this up, I'm going to lose my job. Sonoko bowed her head low, trying to vanish into the scenery while chanting a quiet mantra, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. Ryunosuke and Yutaha locked eyes in a tense standoff. Eventually, Yutaha withdrew her leg and said with a note of disappointment, it seems Akasaka-kun already has someone in his heart. And here I was, intending to repay your kindness with a romance. What a shame. Ryunosuke replied flatly, there's no need. A good girl like you shouldn't waste her time on me. Yutaha brushed him off. Isn't it tradition to repay a lifesaver by offering oneself in marriage? Ryunosuke interjected, as I recall, I didn't save your life. I only saved your book. Yutaha countered, don't be like that. To an author, a novel is their child, it's the same as their own life. You saved my novel, which means you saved my child, which is the same as saving my life. Therefore, you have to marry me. How did the topic jump the tracks this badly? Ryunosuke was starting to feel overwhelmed. What is wrong with this woman? Her logic is getting more nonsensical by the second. Yutaha continued her offensive. For a man she had set her sights on, there was no such thing as giving up. Feelings could be built later, the important thing was establishing the connection. Exhausted, Ryunosuke finally gave her his contact information just so she would let him go. Yutaha waved her phone at him. Call me often, darling. Ryunosuke ignored her. He grabbed his suitcase and made a swift exit. As soon as he was out of sight, he immediately blocked Yutaha's contact on his phone and set his device to reject calls from unknown numbers to prevent her from simply switching phones. This was the first time in his life he had encountered a woman so utterly troublesome. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Back at the table, Yutaha didn't give chase. This was enough for now, if she pushed too hard, she risked being truly hated. Sonoko let out a long, weary sigh. Why do you have to be like this, Yutaha-chan? A girl as beautiful as you, why are you chasing someone else's boyfriend? There are plenty of better men out there. Yutaha stretched. You wouldn't understand, old lady. This is what they call love. A vein popped on Sonoko's forehead. Hee hee. Old lady. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't call me an old lady. Sonoko screamed at Yutaha with such force that a bit of spit landed on Yutaha's face. Yutaha wiped her face with a tissue, a look of pure disgust on her features. Old lady, did you forget to brush your teeth? Hot beverage Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access Kamikawa Naoki END. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 343, The Boss of the Sakuragi Group, Sakuragi Kazuhiko. Once he was out in the world, Ryunosuke's first priority was to clear his debts. Lugging his massive suitcase, he made a beeline for the home of his creditors, the Sakuragi Gumi. This was the stronghold of the organization that had issued Ryunosuke's loan, a Yakuza syndicate boasting nearly 1,000 members. While they couldn't be compared to the big four gangs of Tokyo, their influence was that of local sovereigns. They were the kind of group that demanded absolute subservience from anyone stepping into their territory. Sakuragi Kazuhiko was the father of Sakuragi Yika and the undisputed boss of the organization. His right-hand man was Kirishima, the very person who had dragged Ryunosuke back in the past. Ryunosuke now sat formally on the tatami mats. He had come with the sole, pure intention of repayment. Kazuhiko had briefly suggested that Ryunosuke shouldn't be in such a rush. After all, what if he still needed the cash? In truth, Kazuhiko was simply hungry for the interest. If Ryunosuke settled the debt this year, he owed 96 million yen, up from an initial loan of 87 million. If he delayed another year, it would climb to 108 million, and the year after that, the interest would skyrocket to 120 million. Kazuhiko felt it was a bit of a loss to have Ryunosuke pay so soon. His wife was currently undergoing expensive treatment at a hospital, and as a husband, he was under pressure to bring in more capital. However, Ryunosuke politely declined the generosity and insisted on paying in full. He was no fool. Kazuhiko calculated interest with lethal precision, and since Ryunosuke was even more protective of his own wealth, he knew exactly how much he would lose by waiting another year. Seeing his resolve, Kazuhiko relented. One doesn't exactly block the path of someone coming to pay their debts, do they? So, with a hint of reluctance at the loss of 2 years' worth of interest, he accepted the money. Ryunosuke pushed the suitcase forward. Inside was 40 million yen in cash given to him by Manabu before his departure. Combined with the 40 million check from AI and his royalty check worth 36 million, the total came to 116 million yen, more than enough to kill the debt. His royalties were set at the highest industry standard of 10%. This was thanks to Hiyori's intervention. Normally, a new author would start at 5%, and even a breakout talent like Ryunosuke would be lucky to see 6%. In Japan, royalties for physical books range from 6% to 10%, and this was Ryunosuke's focus. Digital ebooks, by contrast, offer 15% to 30%. Why the massive gap? Ebooks have no printing costs. However, despite the higher percentage, digital works are often considered the least valuable. If 10 people read your novel to the end, an author might only see 2 yen. The platforms swallow about 70% of the profit, leaving the author as little more than a digital laborer. Physical books are a different breed. A publisher lives and dies with the author. If sales tank, the publisher loses money, which is why human editors perform such rigorous curation. This has created a unique market. A physical book is a synonym for quality. If you want high-quality literature, you buy the print version. Conversely, ebooks are often seen as a dumping ground where anyone can post, traffic is unstable, and many authors vanish after 100,000 words once the initial novelty wears off and the quick cash dries up. Physical publishing guarantees quality because if an author stops writing, an editor will literally show up at their house and lock them in a room until the manuscript is finished. Because Ryunosuke earned 10%, with a book price of 960 yen, he made 96 yen per copy. His novel, 5 centimeters per second, had already surpassed 5 million copies in sales, meaning his earnings were roughly 480 million yen. As for I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, Ryunosuke had only just received about 36 million yen since only the first volume was out. He drew from that portion specifically to settle his debt. The reason he didn't count Your Lie in April was because he had suffered a collision with reality. In this world, there actually existed people named Arima Kusai and Miyazono Kaori. One of his main reasons for leaving school was to fix this mess. Ryunosuke massaged his aching head. When he was writing, he was only thinking about his debt and had forgotten that this was a crossover anime world. Fortunately, the problem wasn't insurmountable yet. Kusai was only 9 years old this year. He wouldn't enter the piano competition that triggered the original plot until he was 10. There was still a chance to save him. If necessary, Ryunosuke would derail the plot entirely so Kusai never competed, or he would simply defeat the boy himself. That way, if anyone sued, he could argue that while the names were the same, the experiences were different. Only Kaori's part was difficult, as her physical condition truly mirrored the illness in the novel. He would have to brainstorm a solution for that later. Once the debt was cleared, Kazuhiko produced the house deed, stamped it, and declared that the property used as collateral was now free and returned to him. Ryunosuke accepted it with both hands. The crushing weight of debt was gone. Ryunosuke leaned back in his chair, feeling his shoulders suddenly become light and relaxed. He couldn't stop himself from laughing. Who else could truly understand the ecstasy of a debt suddenly vanishing? Perhaps only a fellow debtor could relate. At that exact moment, the front door swung open. Kirishima walked in leading a small girl. He had just picked up the boss's daughter from elementary school and returned to the Sakuragi-gumi headquarters. Ryunosuke raised a hand in greeting. Yo. Kirishima-san, long time no see. Kirishima smiled, though it looked terrifyingly fierce. Make no mistake, it wasn't intentional. After years of threatening people for a living, a scary grin had simply become his natural reflex. Despite the look, he was genuinely glad to see Ryunosuke again. Chapter 344, Debt-Free at Last. Kirishima handed Yika back to her father after picking her up from elementary school. Finding an empty seat and settling in, he turned his gaze toward Ryunosuke. It's been a long time, kid. Seeing you grow so pale and pampered, it looks like school life has been treating you well. Ryunosuke scratched the back of his head awkwardly. It's all thanks to your help, Kirishima-san. If you hadn't shown me a shred of mercy back then, I'd probably be a nameless corpse rotting in a ditch somewhere. Kirishima went to light a cigarette, but remembering the child in the room, he immediately extinguished it. He spoke in a calm but authoritative tone. Back then, you really were backed into a corner. That hopeless father of yours was a true scoundrel. You don't harbor a grudge against me for sending him to Africa to plant potatoes, do you? Kirishima asked with a mocking edge. Ryunosuke responded with profound calmness, as if they were discussing someone else's life entirely. He took a sip of his tea, watching his own reflection ripple in the cup, and spoke slowly. I don't hate you, Kirishima-san. If you hadn't sent him away, I wouldn't be the man I am today. With my personality, no matter how badly he treated me, I wouldn't have had the heart to fight back just because he was my father. Your actions actually helped me. Kirishima stared intensely into Ryunosuke's eyes, searching for the slightest hint of a lie. In the underworld, offending the wrong person is the ultimate risk, and he could usually spot a fake in a heartbeat. After a long silence, Ryunosuke's expression remained flat and sincere. Finally, Kirishima concluded that the boy wasn't looking for revenge, and he let out a sigh of relief. Deep down, he respected the kid. To pay off such a massive debt through sheer individual effort, without resorting to theft or violence, was proof of a true man. Kirishima invited him for a drink. At first, Ryunosuke declined, explaining he didn't have much of a stomach for alcohol, but Kirishima insisted. What's the problem? You're an adult now, what are you afraid of? Reluctantly, Ryunosuke agreed to stay. The little girl sitting beside Kazuhiko, Yika, tried to take a sip of her father's matcha. She gave it a tiny lick with her small tongue and immediately pulled a face. Bitter. Kazuhiko patted his daughter's head. Of course it's bitter. Don't go drinking dad's stuff, that's a drink for adults. He poured some regular tea into her cup. Yika accepted it with both hands and lapped at it like a cute kitten. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. That night, Ryunosuke drank until he was heavily intoxicated. Since arriving in this world, this was the first time he had truly let loose. Normally, he avoided alcohol like the plague. He set his glass down. But since the debt is gone today, I'm happy. I'll consider this a rare indulgence. Before long, everyone was drunk. Ryunosuke and Kirishima exchanged contact information. Kirishima promised to head to court the next morning to handle the paperwork for lifting Ryunosuke's blacklist status and unfreezing his assets. Finally, his bank cards would be functional again. Ryunosuke, Kazuhiko, and Kirishima eventually collapsed into a deep sleep right on the floor. 3 grown men without a woman to look after them tended to be a messy sight. The only one sober, Yika, first covered her father with a blanket. Then she approached Kirishima, awkwardly dragging a blanket larger than herself to cover him. She was too small to move them to beds, so she let them sleep where they lay. Wiping sweat from her brow, she looked at Ryunosuke. She brought another blanket for him, but this time, she did something different. She slipped into the embrace of his arms herself. In his sleep, Ryunosuke felt something unfamiliar and reflexively pulled the small figure closer. Yika's body trembled slightly, but she didn't resist. Instead, she nuzzled deeper into his chest. Yika looked up and asked the semi-conscious Ryunosuke, "Oni-chan, will you come and marry me?" Ryunosuke opened his weary eyes, his head spinning. He looked at the little girl in his arms and playfully pinched her nose. "You're still so small and already thinking about things like that." Yika pressed him further. "What about when I'm big? Will you marry me then?" Seeing the girl's determination, Ryunosuke smiled and gave her an answer. "If you still want to marry me 10 years from now, I suppose that's fine." Yika immediately kissed Ryunosuke's cheek. Soon, all 4 were fast asleep. Yika curled up in Ryunosuke's arms with a look of pure happiness on her face. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. The next morning. A vein throbbed on both Kirishima's and Kazuhiko's foreheads simultaneously as they saw Ryunosuke still sprawled on the floor with little Yika in his arms. Kazuhiko's temper exploded. Kirishima quickly scooped up the still sleeping young lady and carried her away. Crash! Kazuhiko kicked Ryunosuke's backside with such force that he was sent tumbling right out of the house. Get out of here! Ow! Ryunosuke rubbed his sore rear, still dazed and confused. What did you kick me for, you jerk? I paid my debt. Why the attitude? Kazuhiko rolled up his sleeves. If you don't leave right now, I'll kick you until you can't sit down for a month. Ryunosuke stood up, grumbling. What is wrong with those people? He walked away reluctantly. Meanwhile, Yika woke up rubbing her eyes, wondering why she had suddenly appeared in her own large bed. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. After leaving the Sakuraji Gumi, Ryunosuke stared at the keys in his hand, the keys to his original home. The house that had once been seized as collateral was now legally his again. He decided to go back and check on it. Ryunosuke arrived in a somewhat secluded suburban area. There stood an old house, his home. It wasn't massive, about 147 square meters with a modest, detached yard. Because it had been uninhabited for so long, birds had built nests in the eaves. As he approached, a flock of crows took flight in a panicked flutter. The house had been built in the 80s and looked quite weathered. Ryunosuke stepped inside without taking his shoes off, as the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust and the wood groaned as if it might snap under his weight. He sighed, looking at the dust beneath his feet. This is going to need a total overhaul. I can't live in this state. He planned to head to the supermarket to buy cleaning supplies and basic necessities. Although his royalty savings could easily buy him a brand new luxury apartment, this old house held the memories of his mother. Ryunosuke couldn't bring himself to abandon it, even if his scoundrel of a father had lived there, too. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, journey to planar word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, infinity reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 345, Asada Shino. Ryunosuke arrived at the supermarket, purchased everything he needed, and was now standing by the exit with 2 large bags in hand. He hadn't expected to run into an acquaintance here. Specifically, Aoyama Nanami, who was working a part-time shift as a cashier. However, Ryunosuke didn't greet her. They didn't actually know each other personally, so what would be the point? If Ryunosuke were to dig a little deeper, he would discover that the city also housed a place called Sakurasu Dormitory. Returning to his house, Ryunosuke donned a dust mask, rubber gloves, and boots, ready to begin the deep clean. He soaked a mop and started on the floors. It didn't take long to finish the task. He wiped the sweat from his brow. However, because the house was so old, the wooden floors emitted a heavy, musty scent of decay. He inspected the crawl space beneath the building and found that the support pillars had been decimated by termites. It was crystal clear, this house was officially a collapse hazard. Ryunosuke clapped the dust off his hands, planning to find a contractor tomorrow for a total renovation. This place was no longer fit for human habitation. As for tonight, he was forced to find an inn. After locking up, he sought out a reputable construction firm in the area, paid a deposit, and requested they come by tomorrow to assess whether the house could be saved or if it needed to be razed and rebuilt. Currently, his remaining liquid cash after settling all debts was around 500 million yen. 480 million came from his royalties, and the rest was the surplus from his previous funds. Since he wasn't yet certain if the court had officially lifted the asset freeze, he hadn't dared deposit the money yet. Banks have the right to immediately debit funds to settle outstanding debts if a status hasn't been cleared. Even if the debt is paid, the money remains stuck unless the creditor actively reports the settlement to the court. Carrying that much cash made Ryunosuke incredibly anxious. Who would he blame if it went missing? Fortunately, for convenience, his 480 million in royalties had been converted into a portable check. However, he was still lugging around 20 million yen in cold, hard cash. Right then, Kirishima called. He reported that the application to lift the freeze had been filed, and Ryunosuke could now use his bank cards normally. Ryunosuke finally breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately headed to the bank to deposit the cash and the check. Walking around with that much money solo was just asking for trouble. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Inside the bank. Across the lobby, a mother and daughter were trembling with fear. They huddled in a corner, watching the savage bank robbers. The mother held her daughter tight, keeping her head bowed as low as possible. Despite their efforts, the pair still drew the robbers' attention. The reason was simple: they were far too beautiful to go unnoticed. Asada Shino and her mother had come to the bank to collect the insurance payout following her father's death. He had passed away in a car accident on a mountain road while heading to her mother's family home. Because it happened in such a remote area, help arrived too late, and he bled out. It was just the two of them now. Before he died, her father did indeed have insurance, and just as they came to claim it, the robbery broke out. Shino closed her eyes in despair, not daring to look at the robbers as they approached. One of them grabbed her mother's wrist and yanked her up. Seeing how youthful and beautiful the mother still looked, the scoundrel intended to drag her away. Shino tried to stop him with all her might, clutching the hem of her mother's clothes. Ryunosuke felt like he was having a run of absolute rotten luck. He just wanted to deposit his money, and he ends up in the middle of this. But he had no intention of staying idle. Crouching with his hands on his head, Ryunosuke stealthily shifted positions. When a robber was distracted, he lunged, locking the man's neck, striking him down, and snatching his AK-47. These thugs were only brave because they held the steel. Hearing the commotion behind him, another robber immediately leveled his weapon at Ryunosuke. With a flare of bravado, Ryunosuke raised the AK-47 and shouted, "Weapon in hand, the world in my grasp." But when he pulled the trigger, it was empty. Not a single round. Ryunosuke fumbled with the gun for a second, confirming it was indeed dry, then promptly tossed the rifle aside and threw both hands over his head. "Gentlemen, this is all just a big misunderstanding." The robbers weren't interested in explanations and opened fire. Ryunosuke nimbly flipped a wooden desk to intercept the bullets. Note: a wooden desk cannot stop bullets. Please do not attempt this in real life. Cold sweat poured down Ryunosuke's face. No matter how well he could fight, he was still terrified of bullets. Suddenly, a woman's voice drifted from beside him. "Not a bad move there, big brother." Ryunosuke turned sharply to find a girl with short, silvery blonde hair and red eyes, wearing a red tactical outfit. Ryunosuke froze, his brain lagging as he recognized exactly who this was. Ignoring Ryunosuke's reaction, the girl charged out into the open, pistol in hand. Ryunosuke reached out to stop her, but remembering her abilities, he pulled his hand back. The girl moved as if through a vacuum. In the middle of a hail of bullets, she dodged with casual ease. The robbers couldn't believe their eyes, they reloaded and kept firing blindly. Yet, not a single bullet grazed her. Shino, watching from the sidelines, was mesmerized, her eyes sparkling. The girl who had come to the rescue even had the audacity to yawn. "Yawn, are you guys done shooting yet?" Enraged by the mockery, the robbers fumed but were powerless. The girl then leveled her own weapon. "Since you're done, it's my turn." The robbers panicked, trying to reload, but they had already exhausted their ammunition. As the girl fired, a miracle occurred, her bullets zipped harmlessly past their hair. She didn't hit a thing. The girl tilted her head. "Eh? I missed. Again." She kept firing, scaring the robbers half to death and sending them into hysterical tears. But strangely, not a single shot found its mark. The girl finally got frustrated, reloaded, and kept shooting until her ammo was gone, and still, a score of 0. The girl threw her pistol to the floor and stomped on it in a fit of rage. Initially, the robbers had been prostrate, begging for mercy and promising never to do it again. But as time went on, they realized something was very wrong. Eventually, their fear vanished. They all stared at the girl with blank, weary eyes. This girl, it looks like her marksmanship is actually pathetic. Chapter 346, Nishikiji Chisato. The girl didn't take the mockery lying down. Even though her shots had missed every single target, she proceeded to beat the robbers to a pulp with her bare hands. One by one, she subdued them before calling her colleagues to haul them away. A group of girls in red school uniforms soon arrived at the scene to secure the perpetrators. They appeared to belong to a specialized organization that operated much like a secret intelligence agency. The girl with the infamously poor aim was named Nishikiji Chisato. Her operating code was LC-2808, a member of the secret agency known as Direct Attack, DA. She was also hailed as the strongest Lycoris in history. DA was an organization not unlike the White Room, secretly established by the government to cultivate extraordinary talents. And Nishikiji Chisato, much like Ayanokuji Kiyotaka, was considered the masterpiece of the organization. Chisato knelt down, stroking Shino's hair, and said with a bright face, "You're safe now." Asada replied shyly, "You were amazing, big sister." Note: Yuki Asuna is currently 2 years older than Asada Shino, and the plot of Sword Art Online has not yet begun. Chisato proudly brandished a small fist and put her hands on her hips. Of course. Big sister is invincible. Ryunosuke, standing beside them, interjected without mercy. Didn't every single one of those bullets miss the robbers? Your shooting is actually pathetic. He smirked. Chisato glared at him, annoyed. She pointed her empty pistol at Ryunosuke's forehead, swearing she would prove she was a sharpshooter who never missed. Of course, it was just a joke, she wouldn't actually shoot, she just wanted to tease him. But Ryunosuke didn't know that. He panicked, shouting for her to stop, terrified that the gun might go off on its own. Chisato kept the muzzle, still warm from the previous fire, pressed against his head. This time, it was Ryunosuke's turn to feel like his life was hanging by a thread. He felt as if his soul was about to leave his body from sheer terror. Seeing his reaction, Chisato let out a wide grin and a hi-hi laugh before finally letting him go. Ryunosuke exhaled in relief, asking, "What exactly are you people? You look like schoolgirls, but you're carrying firearms." In truth, he knew exactly who they were, but he felt it was necessary to ask. Without a shred of suspicion, Chisato immediately leaked classified information. "Hehe, we are the Agent Organization Direct Attack, DA. We maintain world peace and eradicate evil forces." Chisato struck a cool pose with her pistol, clearly showing off, until her collar was suddenly yanked from behind by her partner. "Ow, ow. Wait. Don't pull, hey. This is embarrassing, you know." Another short-haired girl in the same agent uniform stared at her with weary eyes. "Do you have any idea that our information is a state secret? How dare you just tell a civilian?" Chisato poked her index fingers together. "What's the big deal? Normal people can't reach our level anyway, right?" Her partner fell silent. Though she hated to admit it, Chisato was right. Ordinary people would never cross paths with their world, let alone understand what they did. Telling them wasn't technically a catastrophe, but she just hated being led around by Chisato's whims. This girl, just because she was the best Lycoris, acted completely as she pleased every single day. Just yesterday, she had intentionally delayed a hostage rescue just because she wanted to help an old lady cross the street. Actually, Chisato had done that on purpose because the hostage was a young master of a financial group with a terrible reputation. She simply couldn't be bothered to save someone like that. As they prepared to leave, Ryunosuke and Shino called out at the same time. "Please wait a moment." ×2. They both looked at each other, surprised. Chisato laughed and waved, saying there was no need for thanks as it was just part of the job. Shino hesitated before speaking up. "Can I join you? I want to be strong like Big Sister. Then I can protect my mother." Chisato smiled proudly and patted Shino's head. Children should grow up without burdens. Don't worry your head about things like this. She knelt down and whispered softly, "Leave the heavy lifting to the adults. Let us carry the weight." Shino muttered quietly, "You aren't that much older than me." Chisato flicked Shino's forehead, feigning anger. "If you keep talking back, I won't take you as a student." Shino's eyes lit up instantly. "You agree to take me as a student?" "Of course." Chisato looked up proudly, but added, "But I only have free time on Saturdays and Sundays. If you want to learn to shoot, come to Café Lycorico to find me." Shino replied with a slightly disgusted expression, "I don't want to learn your pathetic shooting technique. I want to learn how to dodge bullets." "Ow. That hurts." Chisato couldn't resist giving Shino a love tap on the head. "How dare you call your teacher's shooting pathetic? What's pathetic about it? At least if the distance is 2 meters, I'm sure I can hit. Doesn't that mean you practically have to be touching their face?" Ryunosuke and Shino thought in unison. Chisato then looked at Ryunosuke, who had been silent. She rubbed her chin and waved him off with a dismissive expression. "You're too old, I don't want you. I only accept cute girls." A vein popped on Ryunosuke's forehead. "Old, my foot. I'm only years old. We're the same age, you know." Chisato covered her mouth with mock surprise. "Actually, I think I'm a year older than you. Come on, call me Big Sister, and maybe I'll consider taking you on as a student." Ryunosuke wanted to curse, but then he remembered that Chisato's heart was a mechanical one. Perhaps the technology could save Arisu. So, he bit his tongue and reluctantly uttered, "Big Sister." Chisato was genuinely surprised. She expected him to give up, but he actually called her his sister. Did this man have some deep-seated reason? Since she had already given her word, Chisato couldn't take it back. Well, whatever, 2 students weren't a problem. She figured she could just make them work at the cafe to cover the training costs. After finishing the paperwork, she led them both toward Café Lycorico. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped Gift Access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped Gift Access 130 plus chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll Update Schedule. Incoming Envelope Translated Fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming Envelope Original Fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 347, Cafe Lycoris. Actually, what was the truth behind Chisato's mechanical heart? 10 years ago, when Chisato was still a child, the giant radio tower, the symbol of Tokyo, was seized by terrorists. Young Chisato, through her own strength alone, managed to sweep through and eliminate every single one of them. From that day on, she was hailed as the strongest Lycoris in history, a pure genius, in the same vein as Ayanokuji Kiyotaka. However, genius often comes with a price. Much like Sakayanagi Arisu, Chisato suffered from a congenital heart defect. The difference was that she hadn't been as lucky as Arisu. Chisato's heart had stopped beating entirely 10 years ago. Her line of work, which constantly danced between life and death, was impossible to maintain without intense emotional volatility, something a failing heart could never withstand. Thus, 10 years ago, Chisato was saved by Yoshimatsu Shinji of the Allen Institute, who outfitted her with an artificial heart. That was the reason she possessed no pulse. Chisato never forgot the debt and longed to find the person who gave her that heart to thank them in person. Since Ryunosuke's own goals were tied to this individual, he decided, quite shamelessly, to tag along with her. Chisato had little choice but to let him. Besides, she saw incredible potential in Shino's marksmanship, so she figured there was no harm in training her. The three of them arrived at the basement of Cafe Lycoris. Down there lay a shooting range used for drilling and training agents. Chisato wanted to test whether these two actually had a knack for firearms. Shino went first. Although she wore black-rimmed glasses for her nearsightedness, they didn't hinder her aim. Shino's talent was undeniable. Despite it being her first time holding a pistol, 5 out of her 6 shots found their mark. While they weren't all dead-center bullseyes, it was an extraordinary feat for a complete novice. Chisato clapped enthusiastically. Oh ho! Shino-chan, that was amazing. Now, your turn. She turned her gaze toward Ryunosuke. Without saying a word, Ryunosuke gripped the pistol and fired at the target. Unfortunately, his results fell far short of Shino's. Out of 6 bullets, only 3 hit the target, and even then, they were scattered along the outer edges, far from the center. Chisato smirked. Your aim is really that bad? Ryunosuke replied flatly, still better than yours. Heh. Chisato immediately took the bait. She rolled up her sleeves and challenged him to a duel. Fine. Let's go. I'm not afraid of you. Ryunosuke wasn't about to back down. He remembered vividly how pathetic her shooting had been back at the bank. The match began with Shino acting as the referee. As soon as the whistle blew, Ryunosuke and Chisato, both wearing safety goggles, began to aim with deadly seriousness. Moments later, the results were in. Chisato only hit the target twice out of 6 rounds, while Ryunosuke hit it 3 times. Clearly, Ryunosuke had won. He blew on the smoking muzzle of his pistol with an arrogant flare. Chisato hung her head in mock defeat for a second before bouncing back. Hey! How about we have a contest for dodging bullets instead? Ryunosuke's smugness instantly vanished. He knew he couldn't win at this, but he still wanted to try, partly to see how Chisato moved, and partly to steal a few of her techniques. They moved to another room. This one was filled with moving pillars equipped with mechanical sentry guns. Chisato explained the rules. It's simple, whoever avoids the most bullets wins. Without warning, Chisato flipped the switch and stepped inside. A miraculous sight unfolded. No matter how many bullets flew her way, not a single one touched a hair on her head. As if she could predict the future, she observed the trajectory of the bullets the moment the triggers were pulled and dodged with effortless grace. Every mechanical round was spent without once grazing her. Chisato skipped back over to him and pushed him into the fray. Ryunosuke asked anxiously, "Does it hurt when these hit you?" Chisato replied, "Don't worry, they're just paintballs, it doesn't hurt at all, now get in there, hee hee." 18 mechanical pistols began to open fire on him. Ryunosuke's expression didn't waver. He used agile movements, dodging, spinning, and rolling across the floor. Once the ammunition was exhausted, he stood up and straightened his collar with an arrogant air, as if to say, "Is that all?" Chisato clapped. Just as she was about to praise him, she noticed something odd. She squinted her eyes and circled her hands like a pair of binoculars. As Ryunosuke stepped closer, she realized his entire back was littered with impact marks. His shirt had turned completely red from the paint. Chisato looked at the floor, which was spotless and devoid of a single paint stain, then offered a backhanded compliment. "You didn't manage to dodge a single bullet. In a way, that's actually impressive." Ryunosuke turned beet red with embarrassment. "It was my first time. It's only normal to get hit." Chisato laughed. Ahaha. It's normal, sure, but getting hit by every single one is not normal. Maybe you're suited for a bulletproof vest and a career as a human shield. Your passive ability must be always targetable, as in, you're always getting shot, ha ha ha. TCH. Ryunosuke looked away, too tired to keep arguing. Chisato then asked, are you guys hungry? How about eating here at the cafe? My treat. Ryunosuke and Shino shared a look and agreed to stay. At the dining table, Ryunosuke tried to subtly fish for information, attempting to figure out Chisato's timeline so he could find the men who had installed her heart. Chisato answered honestly, hiding nothing. Whether she was just that laid back or simply didn't fear danger, she shared everything bluntly. It seemed she realized Ryunosuke needed her help but was too stiff to ask for it directly. Sipping her drink through a straw, Chisato thought to herself, good grief, why can't he just say it? All this beating around the bush, this guy is way too uptight. Chapter 348, Raising the House and Rebuilding. After gathering the information he needed, Ryunosuke prepared to take his leave. On his way home, he sat on a park bench, mentally organizing the timelines in his head. Currently, Chisato hadn't met Inoue Takaina yet. Based on his calculations, Ryunosuke would have to wait at least another 3 months to cross paths with the person who had installed Chisato's mechanical heart. Since he had no idea where that man was, his only option was to stay close to Chisato and wait for the trail to appear. Ryunosuke massaged his temples as a headache began to bloom. He really had no other choice. The Yu-Gi-Oh tournament was only a month away. He estimated that once it ended, his first wife, Morishita AI, would likely drop 20 million yen to fetch him back home. His time was running out. He couldn't afford to wait that long to meet Chisato's savior. However, he had no intention of giving up, this was the only lead he had. Ryunosuke planned that once he returned, he would negotiate with AI again to be allowed out in the future. After all, now that his debts were cleared, his remaining points had to be used as effectively as possible. Arriving back at the house, Ryunosuke realized he had forgotten to buy a blanket and a pillow. Out of necessity, he slept on the weathered wooden floor, just to get through the night. Needless to say, it was far from a restful sleep. Precedes under-relation succeeds under-relation. The next morning. The construction team Ryunosuke had booked arrived early. They were quite punctual, likely because the pay was generous, ensuring their service was top-notch. Ryunosuke intended to raise the old structure and rebuild a 3-story home with a small yard. While the plot wasn't large enough for a sprawling luxury villa, it was his own land, he didn't want to forget his roots. More importantly, this place held the memories of his mother. His memory of his mother's face was frustratingly hazy. He couldn't see her features clearly, and he wondered if it was due to the blood clot in his brain. He figured he would eventually need surgery to remove it. The demolition process was surprisingly efficient, taking only a few hours. With the help of an excavator and a loader to clear the debris, everything was leveled by midday. As a gesture of gratitude, Ryunosuke treated the workers to lunch at a small local eatery. Perhaps due to Japan's serious aging population issues, the manual labor was still being carried out by men in their 50s and 60s. Among them was even a 72-year-old grandfather. Ryunosuke felt a wave of anxiety watching him and couldn't bear to let him do the heavy lifting, so he asked the foreman to assign him lighter tasks to avoid exhaustion. Even if he wasn't legally liable if something happened, it just didn't sit right with him. They chatted and laughed at the eatery over a casual meal. The workers were incredibly grateful to the young boss. Usually, employers wouldn't treat them to lunch, they were expected to bring their own meals to save money. Ryunosuke's gesture was kind, at the very least, he treated them like human beings. Having been a hard worker in his previous life, Ryunosuke understood their struggle all too well. As he flipped through a newspaper, Ryunosuke told them they were free to order whatever they liked, though he reminded them not to overdo it with the alcohol to avoid workplace accidents. The workers had been craving cold beers to quench their thirst, but they knew the young boss was right, so they settled for bottled cold drinks instead. Ryunosuke was actually using the newspaper to gather information about the outside world. He was still quite out of the loop regarding current affairs, he hadn't even known about the Big Four financial groups that everyone else took for granted. If he had known better, he wouldn't have been so reckless as to become a plagiarist author, which had ended in a mess he was now forced to clean up. He would handle the Arima Kusai and Miyazono Kaori situation later, as he still had a decent window of time. Suddenly, Ryunosuke spotted a familiar figure in the paper. New top idol, Hoshino AI, set to perform at Tokyo Dome. Ryunosuke rubbed his chin. Hoshino AI, huh? If I recall correctly, she's in the same world as Shinomiya Kaguya. An adult Kaguya even interviewed Hoshino AI's daughter, Hoshino Ruby. Tragically, Hoshino AI died young at the hands of the father of her children, Kamiki Hikaru. Ryunosuke closed the paper and began to contemplate. I should find an opportunity to help that poor mother, and while I'm at it, figure out a way to take out that bastard Kamiki Ikaru. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. After lunch, Ryunosuke let the workers rest for an hour and a half, resuming work at 2 p.m. to avoid the peak afternoon heat. The crew worked systematically while Ryunosuke supervised from under a shade umbrella. He didn't strictly need to be there, but since it was his home, he wanted to witness the construction process. Perhaps only a homeowner could truly understand that feeling. Ryunosuke noticed the 72-year-old grandfather pushing a wheelbarrow loaded with heavy bags of cement. His brow furrowed. He turned to the foreman, who was also cooling off beside him, and spoke with clear dissatisfaction. "Didn't I tell you not to give him the heavy work? Why is he still hauling cement?" The foreman looked conflicted. "I tried to give him the light stuff, but the old man refused because his daily wage would be cut in half. I felt sorry for him, his whole family depends on him, so I agreed." Ryunosuke was puzzled. "Where are his children?" The foreman replied, "All of them have passed away." Ryunosuke fell silent. He watched the old man, whose spine could no longer straighten, struggling to push the wheelbarrow. It seemed every family truly had their own crosses to bear. The foreman added, "He has a granddaughter who is reportedly studying at a prestigious university. The tuition and dorm fees are incredibly expensive. The old couple is really fighting an uphill battle. The grandfather works these projects, while his wife runs a small tavern and inn at home. But it's still not enough to cover those high fees. The grandmother even takes on odd jobs, working 3 positions at once just to make ends meet." The foreman shrugged. Ryunosuke smirked, he knew exactly what this cunning foreman was playing at. Eventually, he reached into his own pocket. "Raise his wage, and give him only the light work. I'll cover the difference myself, it won't cost you a dime." The foreman's eyes lit up instantly. He slapped Ryunosuke on the shoulder enthusiastically. "You got it. You're a truly kind-hearted man, kid." Ryunosuke just stared at him with weary eyes. He knew full well he had just been played by the crafty old foreman. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death-seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 349, The Old Man Wants a Matchmaker. The foreman turned out to have a sliver of a conscience after all. He didn't hoard all the credit for himself, instead, he laid out the true situation to the old man exactly as it was, then gestured toward Ryunosuke, who was currently taking a break. Ryunosuke simply waved toward the grandfather without saying a word. The old man bowed deeply to Ryunosuke in a silent show of gratitude. Immediately afterward, the foreman arranged for him to take on the lightest task available, operating the excavator. The excavator in question was a mini-type, so small it looked like a month-old infant in the world of heavy machinery. With a bucket width of only about 60 centimeters, it was incredibly practical for navigating private residential plots. The old man began to dig, peeling away layers of earth with his miniature machine. The foreman returned to sit under the shade umbrella with Ryunosuke to chat. "Thanks, kid," the foreman said. Ryunosuke replied with a flat expression, "Don't mention it." The foreman let out a resigned sigh. "Do you think I'm being manipulative? Wanting to help, but taking such a roundabout way to do it." He offered Ryunosuke a cigarette. Ryunosuke accepted it and tucked it behind his ear. The gesture was telling, it showed he didn't smoke, yet he respected the other man's offering, a very polite bit of social etiquette. To refuse a cigarette outright can sometimes make the giver lose face. By tucking it behind his ear, he gave the impression that he would smoke it later, even though it would likely never be lit. It was a way to preserve the other man's dignity without inconveniencing himself. Responding to the foreman's question, Ryunosuke was blunt, "Didn't you just want to avoid paying the difference out of your own pocket?" The foreman nearly tripped over his own feet. "How can you say that about me? Am I wrong? If that weren't the case, how could a foreman like you not afford such a tiny bonus?" The foreman went silent for a moment before explaining patiently, "I can't help him indefinitely. I have a whole crew of men who need to eat. If I give him special treatment unilaterally, my other workers won't stand for it." Ryunosuke waved him off. "Forget it, I know you have your reasons. You're being noisy." Foreman, neutral face. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. The mini excavator made quick work of the foundation. Afterward, the workers began laying and tying the rebar, preparing for the concrete pour. As dusk began to settle, the steelwork was halted halfway, scheduled to be completed the following day. Ryunosuke treated them all to dinner and informed them not to bother bringing breakfast tomorrow morning, as he would provide it. To him, that kind of money was negligible. Covering 3 meals a day for the workers wasn't expensive, rather, it was a smart investment to ensure they worked with their whole hearts. The workers thought more simply. To them, saving on a day's worth of food meant keeping an extra 1,000 to 2,000 yen in their pockets. It made them incredibly happy, knowing that money could go toward their children's needs. Such is the nature of parents, always wanting the best for their offspring. The 72-year-old grandfather returned home that night and recounted the day's events to his wife. "Goodness, I really met a saint today. That young man doesn't look much older than our granddaughter, but his character is truly extraordinary. What do you think, should we introduce our granddaughter to him?" The grandmother gave him a sharp look while she continued tallying the monthly ledger, ensuring expenses didn't exceed the budget. Without looking up, she said, "Perish the thought. Romance is a free choice these days. Let our granddaughter choose who she likes, we just need to support her from the sidelines." The grandfather scratched the back of his head and let out a sheepish laugh. Haha, true enough. Despite her words, the next day the grandfather actually brought a photo of his granddaughter and flaunted it in front of Ryunosuke. "Look, this is my granddaughter. Pretty, isn't she? Well. Interested in an introduction?" Ryunosuke, neutral face. "Good grief, I treated you like a colleague, and now you want to be my grandfather," he thought. Ryunosuke wasn't actually interested, but he couldn't help stealing a glance at the photo out of curiosity. However, the moment he saw the picture, he nearly choked. Damn it, another acquaintance. The grandfather prodded him, "Come by my house today, I'll treat you to a drink." Ryunosuke shook his head as fast as an electric fan. Just as he was about to refuse, the old man pulled out the sob story card. He stared at the photo of his granddaughter with misty eyes. "This granddaughter of mine, she's had a hard life. Her father abandoned them when she was in middle school. Then, her mother died of overwork when she was in her second year of junior high. Only the two of us, her grandparents, are left to look after her. Once we're gone, what will become of her?" "Stop. I'll come, okay. I'll come." Ryunosuke surrendered, feeling utterly defeated. The grandfather immediately flashed a triumphant grin before shifting back into story mode. "Actually, my granddaughter is very strong, but her heart is fragile. When she was little, whenever there was thunder and rain, she would always sneak into someone else's blanket looking for safety." Ryunosuke listened without interrupting, but eventually, he couldn't help but comment. "Why is this conversation getting so derailed? Aren't you supposed to be building my house? Why are we still talking about your granddaughter?" But the old man kept rambling incessantly. Ryunosuke had no choice but to listen patiently. It was as if the grandfather wanted to spill every one of his granddaughter's secrets so Ryunosuke would know her inside and out. As a man who had lived for 72 years, he felt his instinct for judging character was razor sharp. Ryunosuke was someone who could be trusted. He and his wife were old, their time to accompany their granddaughter was limited. The person who would stay with her for the rest of her life would be her future partner. Don't blame this old man for worrying too much. At 72, he might only have 10 years left, or even less. And his wife would likely follow not long after he was gone. When that happened, his granddaughter would be all alone in this world. Old people always worry about a future that hasn't happened yet. Or perhaps, he was beginning to feel his own health failing, making him desperate to find a pillar for his granddaughter to lean on. If they left her to suffer alone in the world, the two of them would never be able to rest in peace. Chapter 350, Mizuhara Chizuru. Ryunosuke eventually found himself unable to resist the old man's persistent pulling and agreed to visit his home. Of course, he didn't show up empty-handed, even though the grandfather insisted it wasn't necessary. Ryunosuke couldn't ignore social etiquette. To arrive without a gift would be the height of rudeness. Since they couldn't refuse the gesture, the grandfather instructed his wife to prepare a lavish dinner to repay Ryunosuke's kindness through hospitality. The grandmother immediately retreated to the kitchen to begin cooking. By then, it was 8:30 p.m. Normally, the granddaughter should have been home from school, but for the sake of her future, they had enrolled her in a creme school. It was no wonder their expenses were skyrocketing. University preparatory courses were notoriously expensive, costing anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 yen. Shortly after, their granddaughter returned. The sound of shoes being swapped for slippers echoed from the genkan. "I'm home, Grandpa, Grandma." Mizuhara Chizuru had just stepped inside when she spotted a pair of unfamiliar men's shoes. Realizing they had company, she walked further into the house, calling out, "Grandpa, Grandma, do we have a guest?" Chizuru slid open the traditional Japanese sliding door and saw a strange man sitting comfortably on the tatami, sipping tea. Her grandfather waved her over. With some reluctance, Chizuru walked across the room and knelt formally beside him. "Grandpa, what did you need?" The old man looked delighted, especially since he was already starting to get a bit tipsy. Haha, Chizuru, I found a great man for you. Take a look, what do you think? He pointed toward Ryunosuke, who remained engrossed in his tea. Chizuru turned her head and immediately flashed an expression of deep dissatisfaction. Grandpa, let me handle my own love life. Please don't do this again. Seeing his beloved granddaughter genuinely upset, the old man fell silent and dropped the subject, offering an apology to Ryunosuke. Forgive me, her personality is a bit sharp. You don't mind, do you, young boss? Ryunosuke waved it off. It's fine. I didn't come here for that anyway, I just came to eat. Besides, you were the one who insisted on the introduction. He tossed the hot potato right back at the old man. The grandfather scratched the back of his head and laughed loudly. Haha, my mistake. Come, let's get back to eating and drinking. Chizuru eventually picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. Ichino Sayuri, Chizuru's grandmother, emerged from the kitchen carrying an extra dish. She immediately scolded Chizuru for reaching for a side dish with a tone of disapproval. Truly impolite. Don't you know any manners? Chizuru rubbed the back of her hand where she'd been swatted, her face falling as the skin reddened. Having been raised by her grandparents, she had been drilled with traditional values. In the old-fashioned household hierarchy, the women were often expected to wait until the men had finished. Her grandmother began to lecture her on decorum. Ryunosuke signaled that it didn't bother him in the slightest. The scene reminded him of the early days of his relationship with Suzune, who had acted much the same, waiting for her husband to finish before touching her own chopsticks. However, Ryunosuke had no taste for such rigid rules. He told Chizuru to just go ahead and eat. Chizuru stuck her tongue out at her grandmother and began digging into her meal. Grandma Sayuri just shook her head in resignation, though she herself remained kneeling to the side, clearly having no intention of joining them yet. Ryunosuke didn't comment further. He felt it wasn't his place to interfere with the traditions of the older generation. Once the meal was over, Ryunosuke felt heavily intoxicated, struggling even to stand straight. He made a move to head home, but the grandfather quickly stopped him. Stay the night. Your house is being built, where are you going to sleep? Ryunosuke realized he had a point. Besides, this house also functioned as an inn with plenty of vacant rooms. He ended up staying in the room next door. The problem was, the walls were paper-thin, meaning the soundproofing was abysmal. Anything said on the other side reached his ears with crystal clarity. Once they thought their guest was asleep, Chizuru gathered the courage to voice her demand. Grandpa. I want to drop out of university. What are you talking about? The old man roared, causing Chizuru to flinch, though she regained her resolve. What's the point? It's so expensive. I want to work part-time instead. Chizuru wanted to ease the family's burden. To her, her grandparents were the only family she had left. She couldn't stand seeing them work themselves to the bone. However, the grandfather insisted she finish her degree. This was a non-negotiable point. Regarding the cost, he guaranteed they would find a way and told her to focus strictly on her studies. Chizuru began to grow frustrated. College, college. All you ever do is tell me to go to college. Have you ever thought about my feelings? Is this even what I want? Have you even asked me? She clutched her chest, the first time she had ever defied her grandfather with such raw emotion. The old man went silent, swirling the last bit of drink in his glass. Moonlight illuminated his aged, weathered face. He downed the remaining liquid in one go and spoke softly but firmly, "Stay in school. You are not to work." Slam. Chizuru stormed out of the house in a rage. She had had enough. What was so wrong with her wanting to help? She just didn't want to lose the last two people in her life. Was that a crime? Watching his granddaughter leave, the grandfather let out a long, heavy sigh. Grandma Sayuri gently rubbed her husband's back to soothe him. She's grown up. I know. The old man murmured bitterly. But I'm not at peace. If we both go, what will happen to her? She's just starting university, and we're already in our 70s. The grandfather began to cry. He remembered his daughter who had been taken too soon, leaving behind a granddaughter who was everything to an old couple already standing at death's door. They truly could not find peace. Grandma Sayuri began to sob softly as well. In the next room, Ryunosuke felt utterly agitated. He tossed and turned, but sleep eluded him. Finally, he kicked off the blanket. He was officially suffering from insomnia. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. The next morning, while he was at the sink washing his face, he ran into the grandfather. As if nothing had happened the night before, the old man greeted him with a cheerful smile. Yo, young boss. How did you sleep? Well. Ryunosuke looked up, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and framed by heavy dark circles. The grandfather jumped in surprise. Good heavens, what happened to your eyes? Did you not sleep at all? Ryunosuke pointed at his own eyes with a sharp glare. Who do you think is responsible for this, huh? You stinky old man. He couldn't stop himself from snapping. Between the emotional warfare from the old couple all night, Ryunosuke's mental fortifications had been completely demolished. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 351, Building the House. Breakfast was held at the old man's house. Noticing Chizuru still hadn't returned, Ryunosuke asked, has your granddaughter really not been back since last night? The elderly couple answered in a calm, synchronized tone, no need to worry. She most likely just fell asleep at the secluded mountain shrine out back. At that very moment, Chizuru was indeed snoring away at a remote shrine on the mountain. However, she was self-aware enough to have set a phone alarm for her university classes. When the alarm blared, Chizuru woke up, her soul still only halfway back in her body. A stray yellow leaf was stuck in her hair, and she had a bit of drool at the corner of her mouth. Realizing she was cutting it close, she scrambled into her shoes and sprinted toward campus. Clearly, this wasn't the first time this had happened, which explained why her grandparents were so nonchalant. A shrine, huh? Ryunosuke muttered, lost in thought. Seeing that the couple wasn't anxious, he didn't pry further. After breakfast, he headed to the construction site with the grandfather. On the way to his plot of land, Ryunosuke stopped at a snack shop and bought 18 servings of breakfast for the crew. Once there, he distributed the food, waited for them to finish eating, and the work began. As usual, Ryunosuke simply sat and supervised from under the shade of his umbrella. After all, it wouldn't be right to ask the benefactor to do manual labor, would it? The site foreman approached, intending to share the shade. However, Ryunosuke heartlessly kicked him back out. Back to work. I'm not paying you so you can lounge under an umbrella with me. Ow. That hurts. The foreman rubbed his sore backside, but he didn't dare protest since Ryunosuke was the boss. The problem was, as a foreman, he didn't actually have any physical tasks, his job was literally just to watch everyone else work. Forced away, he found a secluded spot under a large tree where he couldn't be seen and continued his slacking. If there was anyone in this project who excelled at getting paid for doing nothing, it was definitely the foreman. His business model involved bringing dozens of subordinates to a site and taking a cut of their wages for himself. The crew didn't mind because he was the one capable of finding them steady work. After a while of lounging, lunchtime arrived. The foreman put out his cigarette and emerged right on time for the meal. Ryunosuke just shook his head, he wasn't blind to the fact that the men hadn't lifted a finger. They returned to the small eatery, and once again, Ryunosuke picked up the tab. Since he had promised to cover 3 meals a day, the workers ordered with enthusiasm. Of course, they were respectful enough not to choose the most expensive items, opting for relatively cheap sets instead. Ryunosuke, however, ordered several extra meat dishes as a supplement to show his appreciation for their hard work. Building a house is grueling physical labor, food that is a bit saltier and greasier provides much-needed energy. Ultimately, the positive impact would return to him, they would work harder and more meticulously. What was the big deal about a few meat dishes? In his previous life, many bosses didn't understand this simple logic. They were stingy with their employees, and as a result, the workers performed half-heartedly or even sabotaged equipment behind the boss's back, leading to much greater losses. Ryunosuke chose to treat people with heart, knowing that those who felt his sincerity would reciprocate in kind. Thanks to his treatment, work that was supposed to take 3 days was finished in just 1.5. The rebar foundation was set and the concrete was poured. Now, all that remained was to assemble the wooden frame on top. Japan is a quake-prone region, which is why most building materials are wood. Interestingly, they used the mortise and tenon technique, similar to the nearly extinct Luban lock technique from China. The entire process used no expansion bolts, they relied on perfectly fitted wooden joints to lock into one another for stability. Even if an earthquake hit, this structure wouldn't budge. The quality of construction in Japan was beyond doubt, given they faced hundreds of minor quakes every year. Shoddy, watered-down projects wouldn't last long here. Once the foundation dried, the rest of the job was just assembling the pre-cut timber like Lego blocks. This part would be finished in a few days. Chizuru's grandfather approached Ryunosuke with a somewhat hesitant expression. Young boss, once the house is built, you'll definitely need furniture, right? Could you leave that part to me? My skills are quite decent, I've been making furniture since I was a boy. Ryunosuke looked at him intently. He knew the old man was looking for extra income. Calculating it out, a full set of furniture could cost millions of yen. Ryunosuke agreed, except for the bed, as he wanted to buy a ready-made one to use as soon as the house was done. The rest of the furniture could be made at a relaxed pace. The grandfather was incredibly grateful and promised to work with flawless precision. He also asked if Ryunosuke had any special requests. Ryunosuke didn't demand much, as long as it was functional. He didn't expect the old man to craft him a dragon throne. At the mention of a dragon throne, the old man's lip twitched. You're really making it hard for me. You think I can carve a dragon into a chair? Only a high-level master carver can do that. Ryunosuke laughed and told him he was joking. However, he did have one small request. Could you build a few secret drawers into the furniture? For example, in the nightstand or the wardrobe, create a small hidden compartment for secret items, like adult magazines or emergency savings. Ryunosuke figured that if he got married later and his wife was too strict with the finances, he needed a ninja way to survive. The grandfather immediately flashed a "men understand men" expression and gave a thumbs up. Say no more. Leave it all to me. Chapter 352, Mizuhara Chizuru's Dream. Believe it or not, in just 3.5 days, the house was finished. Ryunosuke was now ready to move in, needing nothing more than his suitcase. Granted, the place was devoid of furniture since the old man was still in the middle of crafting it. However, Ryunosuke had already purchased a ready-made bed. Just one, for now, as he was living solo. He figured he could worry about buying more later if and when he brought home a wife. Besides, once she was his wife, why sleep in separate beds? Unless, of course, they were fighting. With that logic in mind, Ryunosuke had bought a massive mattress, large enough to fit 4 or 5 people without anyone feeling cramped. Don't ask why he bought one that big, let's just say he planned on having many wives. Meanwhile, the grandfather had enthusiastically purchased stacks of timber and hauled them home to begin his work. He had used every bit of the deposit from Ryunosuke to fund the raw materials. Sayuri watched her husband pile the wood in their yard and could only let out a resigned sigh. What are you doing? Why bring all this lumber home? The old man wiped the sweat from his brow with a towel and answered cheerfully, oh, this is for the furniture. I took an order from that young boss who stayed over the other night. Once this is finished, we could clear 1 million or 2 yen. Sayuri brought her husband some tea to quench his thirst. He sat for a moment to rest, but it wasn't long before he was back at it, holding a saw and a square, measuring the wood, cutting it, and planing the surfaces until they were smooth to the touch. Just like the house construction, this handmade Japanese furniture didn't use a single screw. Instead, it relied on precise mortise and tenon joinery. This offered 2 distinct advantages: if one ever moved, these large pieces could be easily disassembled. Furthermore, the structure was earthquake-resistant. Rather than snapping, vibrations actually caused the joints to settle more tightly, making them sturdier. Sayuri watched from the sidelines, her heart aching to see her husband working so hard, but since she couldn't offer much help, she returned to managing their inn and tavern. In short order, the basic frames of the furniture began to take shape. It looked like everything would be ready in 2 or 3 days. That night happened to be Mizuhara Chizuru's birthday. The grandparents had bought a small cake to celebrate. Chizuru, having just returned home, looked at the cake and said hesitantly, "Grandpa, Grandma, please don't waste your money. Whether my birthday is celebrated or not isn't a big deal." Even though she said that, she couldn't hide her happiness. What are you talking about? Whoever heard of a birthday without a celebration? Grandma Sayuri scolded gently. Chizuru stepped closer and opened the box. It was just a small, 5-inch cake. Despite its size, the cake was brimming with familial warmth. She carefully sliced it into 3 equal portions for herself and her grandparents. The slices were tiny, but they were enough for everyone to enjoy a few bites. Their life was difficult, even her university tuition was the result of these 2 seniors' grueling labor. Chizuru truly didn't want to be a burden to them any longer. The grandfather poured some sake, raised his small cup, and took a sip. Ah, how refreshing. Eating cake while drinking sake has a unique flavor all its own. Unique flavor, my foot. Drink less. Sayuri brought out 2 plates of meat and sat down with them. Don't be like that, Sayuri. Life isn't always smooth sailing. 8 out of 10 things won't go your way. We must keep looking forward, not regretting one's choices is the ultimate truth. Yes, I'll never win an argument with you, Sayuri replied. Suddenly, the grandfather remembered something. Oh right, Chizuru, do you have a dream? It's your birthday, don't you want to make a wish? Chizuru, busy with her cake, murmured, a wish. I'm too old to believe in that stuff. Besides, even if I wish for something, it doesn't mean it'll come true. Seeing her attitude, her grandfather said firmly, who says it won't come true? The two of us can help you make it happen. Just say it. What do you want? We will definitely support you. Chizuru crouched in the corner of the room, hugging her knees. Forget it. Our life is hard enough as it is. Let's not go chasing after impossible things. Slam. The grandfather slammed his sake cup onto the table. When you're told to speak, speak. Sayuri immediately tried to calm him down. You've already got one foot in the grave, why are you shouting at the girl? But. Sayuri, I just want her to reach for her dreams. The old man muttered softly. Chizuru couldn't take it anymore. She covered her ears and screamed, that's enough. What dream? Right now I just want to graduate and get a job. Even if I had a dream, could you two really make it happen? My dream is to be an actress. Can you do that? Instead of being angry, the grandfather showed a look of relief. We certainly can. Why are you so sure, Grandpa? Chizuru asked, dissatisfied. The old man walked over to where Chizuru was curled up in the corner and stroked her head. Because our Chizuru is the best. Chase your dream without hesitation, the two of us are right behind you. Don't worry about anything else. Chizuru bit her lip, remaining silent. From that day on, she enrolled in acting classes to hone her skills. However, this added a massive financial weight to the family. To support their granddaughter's dream, the elderly couple went as far as selling their tavern, keeping only the inn to manage. Chizuru, in turn, studied with everything she had, desperate to become a competent actress as soon as possible to help the family's finances. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. 3 days later. The grandfather cheerfully finished the custom furniture. He loaded everything onto the truck to deliver it to Ryunosuke's house. Once this order was settled, he would have millions of yen to continue funding Chizuru's dream. Be careful on the road, Grandma Sayuri cautioned anxiously. The old man waved her off. Don't worry, I'm just delivering some furniture. However, just after he spoke, his head suddenly throbbed, and his vision began to spin. He clutched his heavy head but brushed it off, assuming it was just exhaustion from working overtime the past few days. He pressed the gas pedal and began driving toward Ryunosuke's home. Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, journey to planar word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, infinity reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 353, Rental Girlfriend. Halfway through the journey, the grandfather's head throbbed violently, and his vision blurred into a gray haze. In that momentary lapse of focus, a fatal accident became inevitable. A massive truck slammed into his vehicle, flipping it over instantly. Ryunosuke's custom furniture lay shattered across the asphalt, while the wheels of the upturned truck continued to spin aimlessly in the air. Soon after, an ambulance rushed the grandfather to the hospital. Upon hearing the news, Chizuru skipped her classes and sprinted through the corridors. When the door to the room opened, she saw her beloved grandfather lying weak, his body tethered to a myriad of medical monitors. Chizuru's eyes immediately welled with tears. Her grandfather was one of the few pieces of family she had left in this world. Sayuri released her husband's hand and looked at Chizuru, forcing a smile to keep her granddaughter from spiraling into panic. It's all right, Chizuru. But Chizuru couldn't stay still. She ran out of the hospital toward the shrine on the mountain behind their home. She ran barefoot, oblivious to the stinging pain of the pavement. There was an old legend at that shrine: if one climbed the stairs barefoot and prostrated themselves before the deity, their wish would be granted. Chizuru knelt before the altar, repeatedly pressing her forehead against the cold floor in prayer. I beg of you, don't take the last of my family. Please. Behind the altar, a nameless deity let out a long, heavy sigh. Even gods are not omnipotent, child. Forgive me, I cannot help you. In truth, he was merely a minor guardian spirit worshipped there. How could he possibly possess the power to save a life already balanced on the precipice of death? Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Elsewhere, Ryunosuke was beginning to wonder why his furniture hadn't arrived. He decided to head to the grandfather's house, only to find it locked tight. A small note was taped to the door. Deepest apologies. Our family is dealing with an emergency. The shop is temporarily closed. Thank you for your understanding. A dark premonition settled in his gut. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Back at the hospital, the grandfather knew his time was short. He tried to comfort his wife, who was sobbing uncontrollably, asking her to stay strong for the life ahead and not to grieve too deeply for him. Once you're gone, what becomes of me? What becomes of Chizuru? Sayuri's voice broke. The grandfather could only offer a pale, bitter smile. I'm so sorry. The cause wasn't just the exhaustion from work and driving. A thorough examination at the hospital revealed that the grandfather was suffering from terminal cancer. I'm beyond saving now, so don't throw our money away on treatments for me, was his final plea to his wife. Listening from behind the door, Chizuru's world shattered. She collapsed onto the floor, ignoring the cuts on her feet. She sobbed piteously, I don't want to be an actress anymore. I just want Grandpa back. Not long after, the grandfather drew his last breath. Previously, Sayuri had intended to sell therein to prolong his life, but he had refused. He wanted the remaining funds to go toward Chizuru's education and her dreams. They brought home the urn containing his ashes and placed it on the family altar, offering prayers every day. True to her husband's final efforts, Sayuri delivered the furniture he had managed to complete to Ryunosuke. Although some pieces were damaged from the crash, she hoped to exchange them for a little money to sustain their lives. Ryunosuke was stunned by the news of the tragedy. To think that only a few days ago they were talking, and now he was gone. He insisted on paying the full original price for all the furniture, including the damaged pieces. However, Sayuri refused. She gave him the broken items for free, feeling it was wrong to accept money for flawed goods. Despite their hardships, they clung fiercely to their dignity. Ryunosuke watched Sayuri leave with a heavy, conflicted heart. He suddenly remembered that in the original story, the grandfather never appeared because he had already passed away. From that point on, he began visiting their home frequently under the guise of being a friend of the late grandfather to check on their well-being. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. To lighten the family's financial burden, Chizuru sought out online part-time work. She signed up for a platform called Rental Girlfriend. There, men paid for the company of a fake girlfriend for emotional fulfillment. In return, Chizuru received payment after a 30% platform commission. Strict rules were in place, no excessive physical contact. Even holding hands required the woman's explicit consent. It was a legal platform with no extra services. Chizuru began living a double life, a student by day and a rental girlfriend in her spare time, all without her grandmother's knowledge. Her dream of becoming an actress was pushed to the furthest corners of her mind. For her, the only thing that mattered now was her grandmother's health. But misfortune seemed relentless. During a health checkup, Sayuri was diagnosed with a malignant terminal tumor, heart failure, and cerebrovascular complications. Years of grueling labor had finally broken her body. Sayuri tried to keep it a secret, but one day Chizuru caught her taking medication and demanded an explanation. Finally, the grandmother told her the truth. Chizuru wept hysterically, declaring she would drop out of school to care for her. What are you saying? How could you quit? Have you no respect for your grandfather's struggle? The grandmother scolded sternly. Forced by her grandmother's resolve, Chizuru continued her studies while working herself to the bone in secret to cover medical expenses. Eventually, the inn and their home were sold. She moved into a cheap, aging apartment while her grandmother remained hospitalized. The money from the sale of the house could at least buy them a little more time. Chapter 354, Visiting Grandma. When Ryunosuke went to visit their home, he found it had already been sold. He realized instantly that something terrible had happened, likely another wave of misfortune crashing down on them. Meanwhile, Chizuru continued her work as a rental girlfriend. She moved through her university days in a state of perpetual exhaustion, desperate to cover their living expenses. The pallor of fatigue was etched clearly into her features. Today, she encountered a customer who was exceptionally rude. The men repeatedly tried to touch and provoke her, but Chizuru consistently dodged him, offering stern warnings. Their relationship was strictly professional. She did not provide those kinds of services. If he wanted an entertainer, he should have looked in the red light district. But the men didn't care. He was obsessed with taking things further. After all, Chizuru possessed a flawless physique, curvy, fair-skinned, tall, and graced with beautiful long black hair. She was the very definition of an S-class beauty with a mature charm. Though she was still new to the rental scene, it was only a matter of time before she became the platform's star attraction. Let go. Chizuru slapped the man as he tried to molest her. Just as she moved to flee, he lunged again, gripping her arm tight. How could a girl's strength compete with a man's? Chizuru was already prepared to call the police, as the man was hounding her without end. At that critical moment, Ryunosuke appeared from behind and seized the man's wrist. He twisted it with such force that the man screamed in agony and spun around. Who the hell are you? Ryunosuke didn't answer. He only looked at a stunned Chizuru. What are you waiting for? Call the police. Snapping out of her daze, Chizuru immediately dialed the authorities. Hearing the word police, the man panicked instantly, begging for mercy. I was wrong. I didn't mean it. Please, forgive me. Ryunosuke ignored him. With one hand locking the man's wrist, he used his foot to pin the man's back to the ground so he couldn't escape. The man struggled with all his might, but it was futile. Before long, the police arrived and took him away. The Japanese police in this world mostly arrived on bicycles. Perhaps due to the low crime rate, the higher-ups seemed indifferent about providing proper facilities. They weren't even given decent operational vehicles. In some areas, if a police car existed at all, it was an old model from the 80s or 90s. It was truly bare bones. Ryunosuke briefly wondered how they would transport the men. Would he be tied to the back rack of a bicycle? Fortunately, Ryunosuke's guess was wrong. The officers parked and locked their bikes, then escorted the men away on foot. Before being led off, the men glared back at him, his eyes burning with a desire for revenge. Ryunosuke merely gave a casual shrug, not taking the threat seriously at all. Besides, he would be back at school in a month. Even if the men wanted payback, he wouldn't find him. And even if they did meet, it was anyone's guess who would be doing the retaliating. Beside a vending machine, Chizuru bought a canned drink for Ryunosuke as a token of gratitude. They had known each other for a while now because of Ryunosuke's frequent visits. The two sat on a park bench, sipping their respective drinks. After a long silence, Ryunosuke spoke up. Why are you doing this kind of work? Chizuru, thinking Ryunosuke suspected her of selling herself, hurried to explain. It's not what you think. I work as a rental girlfriend, not an entertainer in the red light district. Ryunosuke opened the rental Kanojo app, and after grasping how it worked, he asked, still, you shouldn't be doing this. Is there trouble at home? Why was your house sold when I went looking for you? Chizuru stared at the can in her hands and took a deep breath. My grandmother is sick. Besides, who are you to ask? Don't meddle in other people's business. She blamed him for being too inquisitive. Ryunosuke didn't reply, but his fingers moved rapidly across the app on his phone. He immediately booked 188 dates on Chizuru's profile and paid the deposit on the spot. He looked at her. Well, now it is my business, isn't it? My rental girlfriend. Chizuru's cheeks flushed a deep scarlet. Why would you do that? You. Ultimately, Chizuru led him to the hospital to visit her grandmother. When Sayuri saw Ryunosuke enter, she waved happily. Ryunosuke brought a fruit basket, set it on the nightstand, and sat beside the bed. Long time no see, Grandma Sayuri. Oh my, it has been a long time, young boss. Thank you for all your help while my husband was still with us. Sayuri bowed as deeply as she could from her bed. She apologized, her voice weak, for being unable to welcome a guest properly in her condition. Ryunosuke wanted to say something, but the words caught in his throat. In the end, he simply told her to rest well and stepped out of the room to wait for Chizuru. Inside, Chizuru watered the carnations beside her grandmother's bed, flowers representing warmth and the hope for a swift recovery. After saying goodbye to her grandmother, she joined Ryunosuke outside. Ryunosuke asked, what is grandma's diagnosis? Chizuru didn't tell him the full truth, she only said her condition wasn't good. Ryunosuke went silent and didn't press further, realizing he was, after all, an outsider to them. Chizuru took the opportunity to speak. Cancel that order on the app. 188 dates is ridiculous. That's a massive amount of money. As he cancelled the request, Ryunosuke muttered, well, you keep shutting me out. I had to hire your rental girlfriend just to get close. If I hadn't, would you have ever brought me to see your grandma? Chizuru looked at him with weary eyes, then gave him a light swat with her handbag. You're such a busybody, but, thank you. Ryunosuke didn't respond. Before leaving, he simply left her with a message, if you run into trouble, call me. This is my number. He wrote his mobile number on a small scrap of paper and pressed it into Chizuru's hand. It was all he could do. Chizuru stared blankly at the number in her hand. Her lips trembled, her heart a chaotic mess, but she didn't throw the paper away. Perhaps one day she would need it, perhaps, when her grandmother was gone. At that thought, Chizuru knelt on the ground, burying her face in her hands, and wept bitterly. Her grandmother's complications were incurable. For now, they were only buying time in the hospital. What would she do when the money finally ran out? Hot beverage Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/lovefanfiction. Shopping bags benefits. Wrapped gift access to 10+ chapters, anime crossover, making money in classroom of the elite. Wrapped gift access 50 chapters, Sharingan from the start, infinite death seeking in Demon Slayer. Wrapped gift access 30 chapters, Journey to Planar Word. Wrapped gift access 130+ chapters, Infinity Reincarnation. Scroll update schedule. Incoming envelope translated fanfiction, 3 chapters per day. Incoming envelope original fanfiction, 1 to 2 chapters per day. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Thank you so much for your incredible support, everyone. Light skin tone thumbs up sign. Chapter 355, Kinoshita Kanzuya. Chizuru had to be strong. She couldn't afford to collapse. Slowly, she forced herself up from the ground. Now, I have to find a way to cover Grandma's medical bills on my own. The money from selling the house will run out sooner or later, it won't last forever. I can't just rely on savings that are dwindling by the day. Maintaining her usual facade, Chizuru continued her work as a rental girlfriend. It was through this job that she eventually crossed paths with a certain individual, Kinoshita Kanzuya. She didn't particularly care for the young man. His face practically screamed lecher, one look was enough to tell he was harboring indecent thoughts. But for the sake of the money, for the sake of Grandma's treatment, Chizuru endured it. Taking a deep breath, she put on her professional, practiced smile and addressed Kanzuya. So, you're my client this time. What kind of service are you looking for? I can accompany you to the movies, go on a date, or even grab a meal together. Chizuru clasped her hands in front of her chest, leaning forward slightly. She exerted her full charm and appeal to the maximum. Kanzuya was instantly enthralled. The two began their date like any ordinary couple. However, the very next day, Kanzuya realized that this woman wasn't just kind to him, she acted the exact same way with everyone. He flew into a rage, losing his temper and calling Chizuru a cheap woman right to her face. Chizuru, of course, had her pride. She was simply fulfilling an order, doing what she was paid to do, and providing emotional satisfaction as a service. On what grounds did he have to insult her? Weren't the rules clearly stated on the platform? What more did this man want? Seeing the argument leading nowhere, Kanzuya spitefully booked a dozen dates all at once to get his revenge. Chizuru didn't mind, as long as he paid, she would serve him. Thus began a series of exhausting dates. However, Kanzuya began to cross the line, he constantly tried to grab Chizuru's hand. The platform had strict regulations, holding hands required the woman's consent and could not be forced, or it would be classified as sexual harassment. Chizuru rejected his advances. Kanzuya wouldn't accept it, he had paid a fortune, and he couldn't even hold her hand. Just as another fight was about to erupt, Ryunosuke appeared. He stepped in, blocking the path in front of Chizuru and glaring at Kanzuya, a protagonist he utterly loathed. The kind of person who, even after breaking up with his girlfriend, still indulged in filthy fantasies about his ex to the point of self-gratification. The thought of it made Ryunosuke sick. Kanzuya looked at Ryunosuke and felt an instinctive surge of fear. But, believing he was in the right because he had paid for Chizuru's time, he summoned the courage to bark. Who do you think you are? Don't ruin my date, you bastard. Kanzuya tried to act tough to intimidate him, but unfortunately, his legs were shaking violently, betraying his cowardice. Ryunosuke simply stared at him coldly without saying a word. Kanzuya finally lost his nerve, abandoned Chizuru on the spot, and bolted. He didn't even bother trying to get a refund for the date fees. Chizuru's cheeks flushed slightly, but she still gave Ryunosuke a light swat with her small bag. What are you doing here? Ryunosuke didn't answer, he claimed he was just passing by. Chizuru didn't believe him for a second, assuming he had been following her out of concern. Nevertheless, she whispered, "Thank you." Ryunosuke glanced back and gave her a sincere warning. Do you really intend to keep being a rental girlfriend? This kind of thing will keep happening. Many men will try to push their luck just because of your striking looks. Chizuru had no choice. If she didn't work, how would she survive or pay Grandma's medical bills? She gripped her bag tightly. Ryunosuke understood the girl's predicament. Damn it. He hesitated. Should he help? Under what pretext could he offer assistance? If he helped too overtly, the stubborn Chizuru would surely reject him. Ultimately, Ryunosuke used the most classic approach. Right in front of Chizuru, he began an insane booking spree on the rental girlfriend app. After booking exactly 1,000 dates on her profile, he turned to her. Tonight, stay with me. Chizuru bit her lip. She felt like she knew what might happen that night, yet for some reason, she found herself agreeing. By the time she snapped out of it, she and Ryunosuke were standing beside Grandma's hospital bed. Sayuri welcomed them with a broad smile. Seeing her granddaughter arrive with Ryunosuke, the grandmother seemed to misunderstand their relationship. She grasped Ryunosuke's hand with hope in her eyes and pleaded. In the future, can I trust you to look after her? Chizuru was about to explain that their relationship wasn't like that, but Ryunosuke raised a hand to stop her. An old woman on the verge of death only wanted to hear a comforting answer so she could pass on without regrets. Thus, Ryunosuke gave a small, solemn nod. Ha ha. Grandma finally smiled in peace. Now she didn't have to worry anymore, even if she had to leave for the afterlife. They talked until the sun began to set. Before leaving, Ryunosuke reminded Chizuru once more. Come to my house tonight. Don't forget the order on the platform, stay with me tonight. Chizuru's footsteps faltered. Without looking up, she gave a tiny nod, as if resigning herself to her fate. Ryunosuke didn't care whether the girl misunderstood his intentions or not, he walked straight toward his home. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Night fell. Chizuru sat in front of her vanity, applying her makeup with meticulous care. Like a young woman preparing for her wedding night, she dabbed a thin layer of lipstick on her lips. She dressed in her finest clothes and walked straight to Ryunosuke's house. She felt she knew what was coming, but she had no other choice. The weight of Grandma's medical bills and the crushing burden of life had squeezed the air out of her lungs. She bit her lip, holding back the stinging pain in her heart to keep from crying, and kept reassuring herself. It's okay, giving him my first time isn't so bad. At least he isn't a bad person. Chizuru reached the front of the house and gently pressed the doorbell. Moments later, Ryunosuke opened the door. He froze for a split second, struck by how beautiful and radiant she looked with her makeup, but he didn't read into it and invited her in. After a soft, "Excuse me," Chizuru removed her brown boots at the genkan, swapped them for house slippers, and stepped inside, taking in her surroundings. Chapter 356, Moonwatching Under the Moonlight. Since the house had only just been completed, the scent of fresh paint still lingered in the rooms. Ryunosuke threw all the windows wide open to encourage circulation and prevent formaldehyde buildup. Chizuru gazed at the new house. Seeing the furniture, her grandfather's final handiwork, a sudden, suffocating tightness gripped her chest. She traced the surfaces of the wood, remembering him vividly. It was as if he were still right there before her eyes, busy carving away. Ryunosuke headed toward the third-floor balcony and gestured for Chizuru to follow. Her gaze dimmed, she stepped onto the balcony with a sense of numbness. Her feet felt as heavy as lead as she moved with agonizing slowness. Meanwhile, Ryunosuke was already lounging back on a recliner, sporting sunglasses and taking in the moon and stars. Chizuru approached him, her face a mask of tension. She took a deep breath, as if she had finally steeled herself for a definitive choice. "Just say it. What do you want from me?" Chizuru asked. "Don't waste any more time. And whatever happens tonight, please don't tell Grandma. I don't want to hurt her." Ryunosuke took off his sunglasses. He found her words strange but didn't overthink it. "In that case, let's begin." He pointed to the recliner beside him, signaling for her to lie down. Chizuru assumed the activity was to take place right there on the chair. She didn't argue, choosing instead to comply with the man's odd preference. She sat down and began unbuttoning her clothes, one by one. Ryunosuke was just about to comment that, "The moon is beautiful tonight," but when he turned his head, he saw a sight he was definitely not supposed to see. He let out a panicked shout to stop her. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing?" Chizuru looked confused, her hands frozen. "Isn't this what you wanted?" "Wanted, my foot. Did you misunderstand something?" Ryunosuke was genuinely shell-shocked. Chizuru looked up, her gaze completely bewildered. "Then why did you rent me for the night?" Ryunosuke covered his face with both hands, feeling utterly exasperated. "I rented you for a date, obviously. Your job tonight is to keep me company while I look at the moon and stars. What exactly was going through your head, huh?" Chizuru's face turned a violent shade of crimson. She went as red as a boiled lobster, it was as if steam were literally whistling out of her ears. She immediately exploded in a fit of emotional rage. What kind of person invites a girl to his house just to look at the stars? If you do it like this, anyone would misunderstand. Ryunosuke threw his hands up. He knew she'd gotten the wrong idea, but he still defended himself. "So this is my fault." As she hurriedly buttoned her clothes back up, her face burning with immense shame, Chizuru grumbled, "Ugh. I've had enough. You're a spineless coward. Just drop dead." She moved to grab her bag to leave, but Ryunosuke caught her wrist and forced her to stay. "Stay with me tonight. I paid for this, remember? My rental girlfriend." Chizuru bit her lip. Reluctantly, she sat back down and muttered, "That's why I'm saying, can't you stop using words that trigger misunderstandings? You clearly have no intention of doing anything to me, so why talk like that?" Ryunosuke placed his hands behind his head and lay back. "How was I supposed to know you had such a dirty mind?" Chizuru erupted again. She vented her frustration by hitting him repeatedly with her small handbag. "Ow. Stop. Stop hitting me." Ryunosuke shielded his head, begging for mercy. Once she'd had her fill, Chizuru finally stopped and sat on the recliner with her arms crossed. Gradually, her anger began to subside. She hugged her knees, her 10 bare toes occasionally curled and uncurled. Finally, she voiced the doubt in her heart. You're really not going to do anything to me? Tonight is a rare opportunity. What Chizuru meant was that with the mood set like this, even if Ryunosuke had touched her, she might not have refused. But Ryunosuke didn't take the bait. Instead, he pulled out his phone, opened the Rental Kanojo app, and clicked to complete today's date status. He muttered to himself, "Today you watch the moon and stars with me, so that counts as one date. Tomorrow, you'll go to a movie with me, that's another. The day after, we have lunch, I'll count that as a date too." He was mentally calculating how to burn through the 1,000 bookings he had made. After all, he only had a month before he had to return to school. The moonlight illuminated Ryunosuke's face. Chizuru watched him in silence, and for some reason, her heart began to race. She quickly looked away. Ryunosuke didn't notice the change in her. Seeing that she had calmed down, he put his sunglasses back on and said casually, "The moonlight is quite beautiful tonight. Just be good and stay with me all night." Chizuru snorted, but she lay quietly beside him as they gazed at the night sky together. The night grew late. Without realizing it, Chizuru drifted off. Looking at her sleeping face, which appeared flawless and perfect, Ryunosuke didn't harbor a single ill intention. He took a blanket and covered her, then went back to observing the stars alone. After some time had passed, Chizuru, who had actually been faking sleep after waking up briefly, asked in a low voice, "Why are you being so kind to me?" Ryunosuke answered with total calm, "Does there have to be a reason? If I'm kind to you, does it have to mean I have an ulterior motive? What kind of person do you think I am?" Chizuru gave a small smile, appearing relieved. She pulled the blanket tighter, whispered "good night," and truly fell into a deep sleep. Ryunosuke didn't know that because of that single sentence, his remaining 999 dates were about to turn into forever. Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. Dawn arrived, and the sun began to rise. Chizuru woke up, her mind still foggy. She sat up, the blanket sliding down to her waist. She rubbed her eyes and saw him still asleep. She approached Ryunosuke and draped the blanket over him. Chizuru knelt, staring at Ryunosuke's sleeping face, and for some reason, she felt like laughing. As a thought occurred to her, her face gradually flushed. She slowly leaned forward, tucked a stray hair behind her ear, and gave him a fleeting kiss before fleeing the house in a panic. Ryunosuke opened his eyes, watching Chizuru's receding figure. In truth, he hadn't been sleeping, but now his head was spinning. How was he supposed to handle this now? Should we just make this official? Precedes under relation succeeds under relation. The next morning, Ryunosuke took a firm hand in managing Chizuru's grandmother's health. To him, this was no longer an outsider's business, he considered Sayuri family. Ryunosuke reviewed grandma's medical records and asked the doctor if there was any hope for recovery. Chizuru just stood frozen behind him without saying a word. The doctor explained.